No, it's gone away. It's not going to be here.
Oh, it is going away.
Well, there'll be a forum, but not here.
Okay. I thought you said, well, it just can't be it. They couldn't.
I think they're going to do it. They're going to find another place. Yep. Nope. You know, it's just pretty clear. I mean, and you don't change the rules right before the meeting. If you want to change it, you wait until after. I think so. We've never done it. When Tuesday allows you, we created it.
Easy enough to find some.
Yeah. All right, I have 5:31. I'll call to order the meeting of the Cherry Hills Village City Council. Today is Tuesday, September 20th. This will be our study session in which we'll be discussing the Highline Canal Stormwater Conversion Design Report from ICON. And that would be Deputy City Manager Director Jay Goldie. You have the floor.
Good evening, Council, Mayor. Tonight we will have Troy Carmen from ICON go over this report. We will try to keep him to some layman's terms. I knew it was the right choice when he was talking to both PTRC and Planning and Zoning, and he said he actually gets excited about stormwater. So I think we have the right man for the job. And he will break down this report and then answer any questions you may have. And I just want to make sure that everyone understands this is our preliminary draft. We didn't want to bring anything to council and say, here's what, we want to give time for your input, your questions. If there's any other little research we need to do or other things council wants us to look at so we can put together a final report that is acceptable to council and that we can go to the next step hopefully with and start with some construction documents and timing and those type of things. So I will turn it over to Troy.
Mr. Mayor, if I could just add one additional intro statement to what Jay said. Just as a reminder for council, I'm sure council's completely remembers on point the purpose of this study, which was really in preparation for Denver Water attempting to work with all the jurisdictions to take over maintenance of the High Line. So we wanted to make sure that council understood what the eventual costs would be and when, so that you could make an informed decision. So that's really the context.
Great. Mayor, council, thanks for having us back. Jay's introduction was a good one. Stormwater is an exciting thing. And ICON and Matrix were happy to walk you guys through this report here tonight. So what I have on screen is our story map. This is just a condensed version of what's in the report, and hopefully in the next 15 or so minutes between Josh and I, we'll give you guys that overview and then look forward to any questions that you may have that come up. So I think the purpose there was well stated. I'm going to talk through a few different things here as we get into the hydrology and hydraulics, some of the background on how the watersheds work and what that water looks like coming into and out of the canal. And I think within that basic framework, we'll be able to dig into some of those deeper questions about why in the world would we make this conversion and what burdens are we taking over from Denver Water as the current operator of this facility. To put that study area together, the Highline Canal is about 71 miles through the whole metro area. The piece we looked at is only 4 miles. We're from city boundary to city boundary, Bellevue to Hampton, as the canal flows south to north. We looked through it a little bit more detail based on the hydrology that was done by the previous study from the Mile High Flood District. Respect put together a fantastic study and model of all 71 miles. We truncated that piece of it, and we're looking at these basins in particular that drain into the canal. Now that basin boundary line is cut off at the city limits. Of course, there is some water from Denver and other areas east that still contributes, but these were of highest interest to us. One of the biggest points on the hydrology here is that there is, within this 4 miles, very specifically, the nature of Cherry Hills Village has preserved those existing drainage conditions. So the canal's about 140 years old. The water that got there about 140 years ago is the same water that's getting there today. What Cherry Hills has not done is put any big pipes under the canal, big trellises over the canal. We have not changed those inflows to the canal. That's going to come up again and again, and we'll get into it a little bit more. This existing condition, credit to Livable Cities for letting me steal their graphic and draw on it, but the inflows are the water that come in from those upstream basins and hit the canal. One of the reasons stormwater is so exciting is it operates on a basic principle of gravity. So once that water gets down to the canal, it can't go anywhere until it gets up high enough to overtop that trail. And we've had that happen over 140 years, any number of times. Most recently, we had it happen in 2015, and that overflow condition is not desirable, primarily because a canal is not meant to carry water over its embankment. It's meant to move water very slowly and conservatively down the canal and get pulled off for agricultural and other purposes. So as we get into the modeling and we get into looking at this, what we're primarily interested in is making sure this picture from the Department of Interior doesn't ever come to light anywhere in the canal, but particularly these 4 miles we're looking at. We don't want water overtopping that embankment. It's 140 years old. I think it's a fantastic testament that it has lasted that long. My predecessor, together with horse and buggy. However, we have a lot more at risk now, and we don't want to rely upon that. So the hydraulics of this become really important. One way we frame that risk is within FEMA's floodplains. So this council and other commissions have dealt with the FEMA floodplains in a number of different ways. That land use regulation maps out these highest risk areas where we know water is going to flow. This happens to be the 1% annual chance or the 100-year storm. It also represents that condition as if the canal was full and that storm hit. Where would those risks be? So these areas help us identify some of that risk. There are others, smaller drainages that FEMA doesn't consider worthy, but in our terms, in how we look at this canal and filling it with stormwater, this is just one example of how those downstream risks come to light. That 2015 flood event, definitely a very interesting one. I was thrilled to be around town when that happened in the most engineering way. Plenty of other people, that was a very significant event and not a fun one to go through. What's really important about that is the canal did reach its maximum. It did overtop in several locations. And very fortunately, we didn't have any catastrophic embankment failures. But the fact that we have that within recent mindset within recent memory is really important. That's exactly the event that we're trying to prevent from happening. So I mentioned inflows and outflows. So the inflows to the canal come across these main drainages. They also come across any number of backyards and small channels and tributaries that come into the Highline Canal. Those are the areas that we're looking at to try to estimate how much water comes into the canal. Once we have those inflows figured out, we can start looking at the outflows. And so what we're talking about in terms of outflows are the safest way to move that water then out of the canal. We also want a small portion of that water to be in the canal. One of the biggest purposes of this conversion is the irrigation flows are suspended and not likely to come back in plenty of different water rights ways. Can we use that stormwater to preserve the ecology and how things work? We think we can, and we can do that in a few different ways. One way is to put in inlets and pipes. And so as we look at this very schematic kind of diagram, we're taking away that highest risk of sending water over the top of the trail. We want to send it through an appropriately sized inlet that allows water to pond up to a certain storm depth, allows the water quality depth to stay in the canal and do its good purposes. And the outflow comes through a pipe that winds up being fairly inconspicuous within the landscape and moves on downstream. Another favorite talking point within this, this configuration puts less water more frequently downstream. So in 2015, we had a lot of water, and it didn't happen very often. That's not what we're trying to do. We are trying to get less water to move downstream more frequently. We can handle less water in these controlled kind of systems. And so the inlet and pipe is one outflow condition. The spillway is another. So this is strangely similar to what I said we shouldn't do. What's very subtle underneath that is probably 3 feet of rock and soil armoring planted with deep-rooted vegetation. And that spillway is then a very engineered and intentional place for the canal to send water over the embankment. There's a sheet pile cutoff wall that can go between 10 and 35 feet into the ground. There's a lot of ways for the engineering community to understand this is an acceptable condition for spilling. The pipes and inlets have their benefits, the spillways have their benefits, and there's a mix of both of them as we look at the proposed improvements. Within that small little volume of water quality, we've got these water quality berms. They're little dams, they're piles of rock. They're ways to take that storm water, slow it down, and allow it to soak in and permeate through the canal for up to about 72 hours. There's some deep calculations that are based on some rough assumptions, and in some of the example cases, there's water that's lingered longer than 72 hours, and that's got to be dealt with from an operation and maintenance standpoint. But that's the intent, is to put these small rock check dams into the canal and move them through. Now, we have those in 4 places. 2 of them are tucked up against right-of-way for easy access to operation and maintenance, and 2 others are more open. And I'll get into the plans here a little bit, but there's another aspect of things. As the RESPECT study, so the Mile High Flood District funded that holistic look at 71 miles. There's a couple areas along the Cherry Hills Village 4-mile section that need some extra depth. So we've got about 2 feet of fill on the trail, and what that's doing is providing freeboard. That's providing us some margin for error, that as that storm comes up, it doesn't accidentally spill in these low lying areas. So this fill is meant to keep water in the canal during those large storm events. And that's a key piece of things that actually has very little to do with moving water out of the canal, but very intentionally keeps those outflows in the right place. Beyond that, I want to bring Josh up to talk through some of the key benefits that happen with the vegetation and some of the aspects of the canal that are most notable and most livable to everybody. So, Josh.
Thank you, Troy. Thank you to the council for having us here tonight. My name is Joshua Eldridge. I'm a senior ecologist with Matrix Design Group, and we had the opportunity to support Troy on this project. I think the Highline Canal Conservancy got it right when they called this reach of the canal the wooded village. Clearly, this reach of the canal embodies that picturesque experience with all the cottonwoods over the shaded trail. But one thing that is not obvious is that most of the plants that actually exist along the canal are non-native species. And so we also have a very high density of the forest canopy that actually reduces some of the safety and function of this canal system. And so this project is actually introducing opportunities to change some of the visibility as well as the ecological function, specifically plant diversity, and looking at increasing native pollinator species. We, for our ecological assessment, we were really looking more at the landscape function as opposed to just collecting data on every single species that's present. That study has already been done. The Denver Botanic Gardens did a study in 2018, I think it was, where they identified 430 species along the entire 71-mile reach. We were looking more at but that could mean that there's only 1 or 2 occurrences of that species. We really wanted to understand the community of the plant the plant community. And so we identified 39 species, 23 of them being non-native and 4 more being noxious. A lot of those are in that tree canopy area, and that's where we saw the highest density of native species. So when we're talking about the understory, a lot of it is smooth brome, which is a non-native aggressive grass. It's a perennial grass that was planted as part of the channel or the canal stabilization. But the canal itself is really what we would consider a novel ecosystem. It would not exist if man did not intervene and create this system. And so as we look at the change in maintenance with the reduction of Denver Water's involvement and the water that really this plant community is established with, we have to really be mindful of how we can leverage the disturbance to benefit the overall function. So by eliminating the smooth brome through the proposed improvements that Troy hit on there just briefly, we can actually introduce native species that wouldn't otherwise have a chance to get here. I think that you can see in the image there before you, the density that really exists along a lot of this canal. And there's a couple of challenges with that too, is that the sight lines that exist are actually can create conflict. In this turn radius, you can't really see 20 feet down the trail. This also contributes to the potential for wildlife-human conflicts that you probably don't even know are taking event during people's use of the trail, because the density has gotten so high in some places that the wildlife are using the trail as well because they can't move through the trees where they would really like to be. So by reducing the non-native species, selectively thinning, we can improve the function, reduce conflicts, and introduce opportunities for more native species to be present along the canal. Here's another example where you really don't have any visibility outside of that trail. And that's not necessarily a good thing. Everybody loves trees, right? We know that for a fact. And it doesn't matter if you're in Cherry Hills Village, Globeville, where you live, people love trees. And so it's very important to understand that anytime we are talking about removing trees, we're going to be very specific about what we're looking for. And if we're taking out a desirable species, we're going to replace it with something else that's going to be equally important to the function of this system. But we are not going to replace non-native trees with native trees because, again, the density is a concern. And the long-term safety and function of this canal has to be considered. Trees are not going to start dying just because the water has been turned off for a couple years, but 5 years from now, that might not be the case. And so trees that are stressed or don't have the same available resources are going to start dying, and they will be either replaced by non-native species like Siberian elm, which is present along the canal, or others wherein we want to make sure that we can, and some of my recommendations here are for the canal in its entirety, and you know that the projects that we're proposing are a much smaller subset of the 4 mile reach. But again, the themes that we've identified for these projects exist throughout the entire canal. And so making sure that we can selectively thin to highlight the species and individuals that we want to protect. So with that, pre-construction forestry operations would be recommended because we also want to kind of phase out the aesthetics and help people understand, hey, something's happening here. If you go in and you just start removing trees and then you start turning over dirt, people usually have a little bit stronger reaction than if they see this kind of piecemeal, like, oh, something's happening, but it's not too bad yet. Let's settle in on this idea. And then, oh, okay, they're really doing something more now. So that's a strategy that we've seen very, very effective in communicating to the public in terms of what's happening and the why. Along with that is pre-construction weed control. As you start turning over dirt, the seed bank is going to become alive again. And there's a lot of noxious species that can sit dormant in the soil for potentially decades. And so making sure that you're staying ahead of that maintenance is really important because we want to make sure that once we get in there for the revegetation, that we can limit the amount of maintenance that is necessary long-term. So there's thinking about long-term maintenance begins even before construction starts. And so we have a few strategies that can help along with that as well. And Troy can talk a little bit more about some of the operations and maintenance before we get into the actual proposed design.
Perfect. Thank you, Josh. So what I'm going to move to is just to look at a few of these drawings here as we get into these proposed improvements. And to go back in time just a little bit, Jay pointed out this is essentially a 30% design. We have an initial look at the engineering. We have some of the analysis that's complete. We have an idea of what improvements are going to be best, and we have cited them according to some of the best assumptions we have to date. There's still a lot of room to grow and move this thing around as we bounce off of different obstacles and permit requirements and different things like that. As I step through these drawings, we'll get just a visual on some of the engineering behind some of this, and then I think it'll be a great time to peel off to some questions, and then we can get into some of the other O&M and proposed phasing and such like that. So the first drawing here is the Mansfield water quality berm. So this is, again, one of those small, short little dams that's placed in the canal to increase infiltration and promote use of that water for the vegetation. What's unique about this one is we have some informal trails in the area, some interesting ways to cross the canal today. We're going to improve upon that with some natural boulders and some rocks that, as you look in detail at those drawings, there's certain elevations on each of those that allow us to have as safe as a possible stepping stone across the canal there to give people a useful crossing there. What's also built into this is some existing or some abutments that become useful for some future bridge crossing. And so within this outlet structure and pipe design, we can embed those concrete abutments, and then the city can come back in with a bridge structure at some later date. So we're trying to plan ahead with that water quality berm being built around some things. The next few drawings show you a plan and profile of that section of trail that needs to be raised up. You can get a sense of that existing and proposed grade as it comes up on Colorado Boulevard. One of the next water quality berms is at Colorado Boulevard. We will come back to that one. This is here at Three Pond Park. This is one of those inlet and pipe outflow conditions. We can connect in with those inlets at Bel Air, collect some trash out in the street and make some good improvements there. Another pipe outfall proposed here at Dahlia Hollow. This is a really steep embankment. There's a lot of water here. This is one of our larger pipe installations, a big bank of inlets that needs some refinement, but one of those cases where we can take overflows and safely move them downstream into that natural channel. Here at Quincy, water quality berm that we're tucking underneath Quincy Avenue Bridge. Part of the reason for that is within any of these detention ponds that you see around town, those water quality ponds tend to have somewhat of a bathtub ring. In the worst places, it's kind of a black scum mark at a certain level. We're trying to hold that water quality and some of those less desirable features of these stormwater amenities underneath the bridge where they can be out of sight and yet still accessible from right away so crews can easily get to them. So some bit of strategy in how that all comes together. Blackmer Trib is our spillway. So this was an instance that had a few different iterations. As engineering goes, our first design took out about 162 trees. We met with staff and found out that was probably the not preferred location for that. From an engineering standpoint, it was perfect. We had a very good reason for putting that spillway there. But understanding that if we moved it just a little bit upstream, we actually could preserve that tree canopy and keep a lot of those things together and still minimize that risk by increasing the length of the spillway. And as we have this down at the south end of the canal, we're actually taking care of the fact that if we get more water than expected from those upstream contributors to the canal, we're allowing that water to spill out before it can cause any more trouble than necessary within the village. And so that spillway location has an intentional purpose there. At Dahlia, we have another small informal crossing at a trail location. This is at a bend in the canal that helps slow some of those velocities and keep things under control. And so that's the quickest look through the engineering drawings as we have them to date. There's, as you guys well know from the packets, plenty of other information there. But in the interest of time and whatever questions Mayor and Council may have, I'm happy to field those.
Thank you. That was a great presentation, informative. I'll start with Councilor Sheldon. Questions?
Thanks, Troy and Josh. Great presentation. Very informative. I like that you put together basically a website for us to follow along with. That's great. I've got a handful of questions. I'm going to probably skip a few just to make sure that we get through the rest of council's comments, but if we have time, I might come back to them. Can you explain the last paragraph of page 6 of your report? I didn't really understand it. It's page 6 where it says, in the proposed condition, storm event, we're talking about the 2015 event, would likely have the same effect on Greenwood Village until they implement the same kind of stormwater conversion in place. However, the village, the result would be excess stormwater that maxed out the canal in 2015 being disturbed to discharges from the inlets and pipes at Colorado Boulevard, Three Pond Park, Dahlia Hollow, and Blackmer Trib Spillway. I'm not really following that. I read it a bunch of times. I'm not sure I actually understand what it's saying.
What that's saying, Dan, is with these proposed improvements, like an inlet and pipe or a spillway condition, these proposed improvements take that significant storm event and reduce it to a level that sends that water out slowly and more conservatively through these systems into those natural drainage ways. Greenwood Village and other communities that aren't taking this lead on making these conversions will still have that existing condition problem where the water fills the canal and overtops the trail and risks the larger catastrophic failure. What I'm making the point of in that paragraph is these improvements are meant to mitigate against
Right,
something
okay,
like the 2015
I
flood.
gathered that was the intent of it. I was reading it, rereading it, and I'm not sure it was missing a word or something, but I figured that was the answer. I just wanted to confirm that.
Good one.
On page 7 and 8 of your report, the parentheses, the word in the parentheses, is that the acres that's impacted by that basin? The number that's in each parentheses?
I don't have a copy of it here.
Okay, so like
Just remind me.
Greenwood, Quincy Gulch, parens 260, Dahlia Street, parens 258. It's not a station on a map. I don't know what it is, though.
I believe that's just an identifier within the model. So it's just a
Irrelevant
unique-
for us?
it's-
Okay.
Yeah, it's just a unique condition of it.
All right, I just didn't understand what those were.
Yep.
One of my more important questions, I'm sure you've already thought this through, but on page 16, you talk about raising the surface level of the trail around Colorado Boulevard.
Right.
I think it's on the west side of Colorado Boulevard is what it says.
Yep.
Does that have any negative or adverse impact to the homeowners, either on the upstream or downstream side of that? Because I think I saw the plan view is actually changing a little bit of alignment as well.
So horizontal alignment doesn't have to change on that. And there is a potential impact in terms of view shed. So as the trail raises about 2 feet, it's possible that eyesight, that view down is at a perched level. However, that is in exchange for a significant level of safety from an improved embankment.
But that improved, I guess I wasn't even thinking about the view shed. I was more thinking about, does improving one side of it potentially have an adverse effect on the other side of the drainage?
The upstream side, the inflow side of the canal wouldn't be affected by that.
Okay, it's not going to act more as a dam because we're raising it up on one side?
No, in fact, that water surface is a freeboard water surface. So what we're providing for is we don't have a modeled water surface elevation there. But if back-to-back storms hit, if something beyond our modeled assumptions hit, that's why we're putting that extra height on the embankment.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to ask you about the, and I don't know if this is for you so much as maybe our own staff, but at one point on page 18 of your report, we talk about charging our homeowners if they want to get a permit to discharge, charging them dollar for dollar. If they're 1/200th of a acre of impact, that we would charge them 0.5%. It makes sense. The math makes perfect sense. What I don't think is proven up, and I think it'll take 5 or 10 years before it does prove itself up, would be to see if that really works. And I would suggest once we do let this thing mature and really get to the point where we're about to adopt it, I think we should be at 1.5x or 2x, at least initially. It's not going to be a huge cost, I don't think, to the end user to be charging them that 1.5 or 2x the cost that we think it is based on the acreage impact. But I think chances are more likely than not that we will under budget in here, and we will end up funding whatever shortfall that is out of the city's pocket.
And there's a lot of work yet to do on that. The main point when we discussed this was our calculations are based on the respect study and what Troy has done, not adding any water. So when these residents that want to build homes on the upside want to do that, we want to make sure that, we're taking over that liability now in the maintenance. So when they release that water into the canal, we can just have enough offset so we can contribute that towards the extra maintenance.
I get it. I'm just, I appreciate exactly what you're saying, and I think we're saying the same thing. I'm just suggesting that whatever we use to determine that number, I think we should increase the number. I just do. I'm just telling you, this is a trial. We're trying this for the first time, and we're not.
Well, and
rather us not be short because we underestimated what it was going to cost to allow these owners to drain into the city's 4-mile stretch.
Yeah, and we've talked, the process, would ultimately come to city council, but, those homeowners would have to get the same model that Troy has from Respect, and they would have to show us what the impact is.
Right.
Based on that model. And then, we haven't looked at, is it a one-time fee? Is it a yearly fee? How do we do that? And can we, if the fees start going up over years, can we up the fee for each?
Okay, so maybe that's a good segue into my next comment. With this license agreement on one of your appendices, the property owner use of the canal, Appendix A, it talks about the applicant paying a lump sum fee for 100 years of O&M. Is that just a placeholder?
Again, it's just an idea.
Okay.
We haven't worked out the details of that.
Got it. Let me see if I have anything else. Is there a legend in your tree plan, your 30% tree set? There's no legend for the trees actually in here that I could find, so I don't know which tree species you're proposing in the.
Josh didn't do that one. Troy and Davey, we did that years ago. That will need updated. And so we didn't include the legend because the legend is outdated and some of the trees are no longer on the list. So that would be updated in the next steps.
I guess my final question is regarding potential reuse of this stormwater. Do we have a plan? Is there a canal-wide plan to reuse any of this water, reuse it for irrigation or some other gray water purpose?
So the only plan that's implemented across that flood district study in the 71 miles is to indicate how much those inflows will come into the canal and how much that changes the flows within the canal. What's unique, and this is paramount to the 4-mile reach here, is that we don't have any change in those inflows. Because of everything that's been preserved along the canal, all of those inflows exist today as they have for 100 and some years. And so we don't have as big of a change. And no, there's no other communities that have gotten to a level of detail like this yet. And they're working towards it to figure out some of those bigger details about taking a 60-inch pipe that runs under the canal and putting part of that up on top of the canal. That's a bigger question that other cities have to deal with. Very fortunately, we have a better situation with those inflows here.
And with water rights, that would even, the reuse of it is not going to be just really
It's tricky
easy.
trying to figure out what's stormwater that's coming in versus canal water.
Yeah, and who owns that stormwater?
It's owned downstream. I mean, this water all goes to South Platte, so you can't use it. That's part of the issue.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Troy, one of your first slides described a floodplain and a flood, was it a flow? What's the difference between those?
The FEMA floodplains are here. The floodway is annotated. Is that the root of the question there?
Yes, yeah, it is.
Floodway is a really unfortunate term within the National Flood Insurance Program that was developed to try to explain the highest risk area. And so as the NFIP came to light in the 70s, everybody got a hold of the 100-year floodplain and said, that's ridiculous, Troy. You can't possibly regulate all of that property. I can build levees. I can encroach on the floodplain. You just got to tell me how far I can do that before I hurt somebody else downstream. The floodway was the answer to that question. So the floodway is the narrowest available conveyance to move that 100-year storm. As it is in the city and our code through the village, that floodplain equals floodway. It allows no encroachment. And so the floodway in this report and for the context of what we're talking about has no particular bearing on things.
And yet, wasn't it the floodway that we see here? That's where the real damage took place in that 2015 event.
Yeah, these floodplains and floodway, they're somewhat coincident in most places. That 2015 event, particularly at Random Road and where Greenwood Gulch came in, that was the peak of the overflows. And as that confluence came together there, that was yes, the biggest issues along Random Road and right here where we're standing today.
I guess it just, I understand how we can control, and you guys have done a marvelous job regarding, as it relates to the High Line. As one who lives on that side of the village and who saw the devastation to homes, how can we mitigate that happening again?
Yeah, I think one of the best ways to get there is these proposed improvements give us a chance to control that release. And so as we look at a spillway or a pipe and inlet kind of feature, sorry, my scroll's going too far here, what we're doing to that 2015 event, if we had these improvements constructed years ago, that storm event comes up and begins to release into this outflow system through the course of the hydrograph, through the course of time as that storm hits. What happened in 2015 is back on that existing conditions deal, in that we didn't have that slower release over that longer period of time. That kettle kept brewing and brewing and brewing until it popped and came over the top. That peak then happened to be coincident with a lot of the same stuff that was coming from Greenwood Village. And that's why at that confluence area, we had more water than our infrastructure could handle. And so by allowing the canal to act like it did in 2015, there's more risk than we need to take there. By putting in these pipes or spillways, regardless of what the other communities do south of us, we're mitigating against that happening again.
Yeah, thank you. Very basically, help me understand where, right now Denver Water controls, what do they control? And it looks like all these improvements are going to take place within Denver Water's space.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's within the footprint of the canal. So there's nothing we really have to get to in terms of connecting other stormwater infrastructure. We don't have much else we have to get into with the network. These are very isolated water quality berms, the spillway improvements and such. They can exist within that canal structure itself. So other stormwater projects or say water line projects often have to spider out into the greater network. This is a unique bit of infrastructure in that it can operate within the existing footprint of the canal.
Real quick to follow up on that, you might just talk a little bit about where we are specifically targeting for that water to then release. Blackmere being the biggest example.
Yep.
It's not just being released into a neighborhood, right? It's not just being released into people's backyards.
Right.
It's released into an area that, while that's outside of the domain of Denver Water and the boundaries, it's still into an area that water flowing into works
Naturally.
yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
Thank you.
The northern side of the village's canal has no real good outflow locations. They've been built up and different things have compromised those natural drainages. So most of the outflow locations exist from Three Pond south. And that puts it into those natural drainages that see the water today are open space and reserved and can handle some of that additional risk. More than anything, with those inlet and pipes and those spillways, we're trying to release less water more frequently and hope that that does the best we can to mitigate against something like a big storm event.
Thank you, Troy.
Yeah.
Councilor Brown?
If you can go back, I think it's the very first slide where you were talking about looking at the drainage, and thank you. And you acknowledged that there's water from Denver and other places, but I'm imagining that you don't feel that that's significant, or about how far out do those drainages extend?
So it does cross over I-25, just north of 225. There's just a small high point that drains this way. Everything else is generally west of I-25. Where we can take some comfort in our assumptions is just Colorado water law, in that quantity, quality, manner of flow. Any improvements that happen, regardless of whatever land use decisions they make and such, still have to meet that standard, which is no more water, no worse quality, and generally the same manner of flow that it comes to us. So we can rely on that as a backstop. Within the village, in those basins, we have a little bit more option to influence how that water gets there or not.
Right. I might mention that the calculations are still based on each of those entire drainage basins,
Okay, yeah, not just what's.
not just what's in
We don't just
Cherry Hills.
assume
We
that-
we don't assume there's a wall.
The water
So all the
gets right to our border and
calculations
stuff.
include the rest. Those drainage basins aren't huge beyond Cherry Hills, but they are in the model.
Okay. And as you pointed out, they're already draining that way, right? So it's not new. But just with all the development that's going on over there, it's always something to be aware of. When you mentioned raising the trail, is that the entire length or in certain places or?
Only in certain places, and generally
Okay.
just west of Colorado Boulevard here. And if we dig into some of the small detail there, the dashed line is that existing ground, and the proposed ground is a conceptual look at where that would be filled. So it's a variable depth, but that proposed ground is based on then making sure we have enough elevation above that water surface so that those homes downstream are protected.
Right.
There is no good outflow through that portion of the canal. We want to make sure that water stays in.
And we have started discussions about how can we screen that. If we're going to raise that, let's look at our vegetation and how we can mitigate some of that, knowing that somebody right below is
Right.
probably
Because
going to.
there is that section right there near Dahlia Hollow Park where the homes are already
Yeah, they're way.
much
they're-
lower.
Yeah.
As you walk along, you can look into people's backyards.
And that's a section that'll be unchanged.
Okay.
We wouldn't touch the trail in that spot. Through Three Pond and Dahlia Hollow, we're more interested in finding the best way to get that water under the canal or through the canal.
Right. And then on I think the slide with the spillway, it says a resin-based trail service. What's a resin-based trail
So
service?
this was a good one that Jay quizzed me on, and there's nothing prescriptive about that. But what we're trying to address is that the spillway is a lowered section of the trail. It has a chance to have water rushing over the top of it. The crusher fines or gravel trail could increase your maintenance cost in that you'd have to replace that after a large event. Not a significant replacement cost. Resin-based trail is something that's been used in a handful of different recreational places. It's actually just it's not even oil-based, but a paraffin-based glue that sticks that gravel together.
Yeah, you would hardly notice the difference. We've used it before. It's an additive to the crusher fines that we use currently, but it holds them together more like a pavement.
Right.
It's still soft for runners and horses, but it keeps it from just washing away.
Right. Well, I think, and as it relates to that and the vegetation plan, I imagine that those details are things that can be discussed, because I do think those are the things that our residents will feel the most. You know, as someone who's had to replace my sewer system, for example, it just really is a bummer to spend that much money on something that you can't see. But when you're replacing the driveway that is on top of it, you know, that's the part you notice. And so I just want to be really sensitive to the character of the trail as it is here. You know, I know that perhaps it's maybe not the healthiest ecosystem, that it's so dense, but that is what kind of makes our stretch of the trail unique. And so we just want to be sensitive to all those things moving forward.
Councilor Wheel?
Thanks. Great report. Understandable for a layman. The question I had is, beyond the 4 miles that we have running through Cherry Hills Village, there's obviously dependencies on huge surge from upstream or obstruction from downstream. What goes on to kind of coordinate the progress and the improvement on the canal so that we're not doing something in isolation?
Yeah, really great perspective on how a 71-mile gravity system works. One thing I'll point to is there's a 1999 agreement from Denver Water that influenced a lot of the engineering designs around the canal for a couple decades. The reason I go back to that is in 1999, they formulated the point that Denver Water did not want any more stormwater in their canal. Any new improvements that happened had to find a different place for that stormwater. That was a risk that wasn't acceptable to what they were using as an irrigation system. What that did then was start that coordination amongst different jurisdictions along the canal. And they had to then coordinate, how are we going to get this stormwater past this huge embankment that exists through here? And so that was a genesis of some of these models and different things that then look at the whole system and interpret those inflows and outflows and make sure that they're going in the right place. As that's evolved, and now we're looking to put some piece of that stormwater, that water quality piece, back in the canal, we can build on those same models and understand how much is coming in from Greenwood Village, how much is going out to Denver Water, and use that existing condition to say, sorry, too much Greenwood Village, or here's some more Denver, whatever that arithmetic may be. So that hydraulic modeling gets us there. It's based upon some of the past laws and regulations that governed the canal. There's a deep water rights piece to it that comes into that as well, in that we can't move that water down the canal like Denver Water did. They owned that right and had the absolute privilege and responsibility to do that. That's not how we're trying to operate this as a stormwater converted canal. We're actually trying to hold it there for a short amount of time and move it downstream with less water more frequently.
Councilor Savabi?
Thank you for that presentation and providing a summary. Since my PhD is not in stormwater management, I believed everything you said.
Fantastic.
So I'm going to rely on, what you said, as well as Mr. Goldie and our city staff, to basically, make the best decision for us as we move forward and see what the numbers look like. Thank you.
A quick follow-up to follow really on Dan's point. You haven't mentioned the 72-hour rule, and I wondered how, that's another issue, I thought, that you have to find some way to let this water go out after 72 hours in order to comply. Can you talk about that? Yeah,
there's I think two really key points to that. One, our inflows aren't changing. So very unique to the village. We have a very fortunate spot where that stormwater is coming in, and it's been coming in. So we don't have to prove a change. So how that stormwater's acted for the last 140 years, we're not changing it. We're not intercepting any more or less or making any impact there. Secondly, those small 18 to 24-inch berms have grates and pipes that are designed expressly to move that water down through. So we're not impounding it. We're allowing it to continue on its natural path, which in our case is the canal. Where this system gets much more complicated in particularly northern communities is that we're actually going to bring in new water to the canal and have issues there. We have a very fortunate position here where those questions are answered based on a historic condition that's very favorable.
One other question, in the flood documentation report, you mentioned expanding the culverts under University and Quincy.
Yes.
That's to be big ones, 14 foot by 5, huge. Have you priced that out too? Is that part of your calculus or not?
So those downstream improvements, this is actually a fantastic piece of things. In 2015, this kind of concept was only in its infancy, and Harriet, among a few others, probably had it in mind. But the best answer to the 2015 flood was, well, we need bigger culverts, and we clearly have to pass a lot of water because it's coming. What we're doing with this stormwater conversion does allow us to reduce that downstream infrastructure. Yeah. And so there's a fortunate twist on that, and I loved that flood event, and I haven't read that report in a long time, but that recommendation would change given this conversion. What is included in some of the cost estimates is an additional operation and maintenance cost to handling that more frequent runoff. Some of the smaller infrastructure, the small metal driveway culverts and such along Quincy, are likely to have more maintenance costs as this water comes its way.
Got it. So no changes out here.
I would still love to have a fantastic discussion about how much more efficient that can be hydraulically, but for another day.
We would too. Actually, we've looked at that in the past, but there's so many things going underneath that intersection that is quite a challenge to.
Turns out potable water lines are quite the obstacle.
Right. Any other questions for?
How does city ditch, so as we go to the end, right, down to Clarkson University, the only way out is city ditch, right?
Right.
At that point.
Well, no, it's Little Dry Creek. City Ditch is its own.
You're right.
Is
Yes.
its own canal. They're connected, and we did have big issues there in 2015, but that's not where this water is designed to go.
City Ditch has its own intercept with Little Dry Creek, much like the canal does with all these other sources. However, City Ditch is not connected to the conversion in that way. So you could look at the Highline Canal and its intercept of these 3 or 4 natural drainage ways as that's the big brother. City Ditch and Little Dry Creek will be a little brother that gets some additional thought, but big brother comes first.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I know that you like to end a few minutes early just to give people a chance, but were there any concluding remarks or slides that you had that talked about sort of the big picture and the feasibility of the city taking this over?
Yeah, I think there's some good points here within the sequence of things. As we look at where the past studies have come with the Conservancy and this current study, our next steps get us to a 60 or 90%. We want to progress through confirming our assumptions, making the right engineering decisions. One of the biggest things we've got is a meeting with the Conservancy and looking over costs. Our cost estimates right now are very conservative in how we look at each of these elements, from tree maintenance, operations, downstream stormwater improvements. We want to refine those. We want to be able to tighten up our assumptions on these things. And so as we get to these further design levels, I think there's a lot more information that comes out in terms of the costing. And then moving into that construction, which again comes in a very logical sequence. There's parts of this to do first and there's parts to do last. Spillway is a very interesting first candidate. And then we move to an operation and maintenance phase, which gets us into making sure all of our improvements stay intact and the canal does function ecologically, recreationally, but also during big rainstorms.
Thank you very much. All right.
The last thing I would say is we will eventually be bringing this back to City Council, not to implement or adopt, but it is a report that the city commissioned, and I think it's appropriate for you to accept the report. Between now and then, if there's other questions, other technical questions, layman questions, hopefully we have additional information for you when we get to that phase about some of the costs after we meet with the Conservancy and Denver Water. But if there's things like that you want to know that we can bring back to you, please shoot them our way. There's no reason to wait until that meeting date. to ask these questions. We would love to give you the best information for what you would like to know.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? If not, I'll give everybody, I'll recess now and give everybody 5 minutes to get set up and organized and take a break. We'll reconvene here at 6:30. right, it's 6:30. I'm going to call to order the meeting of Cherry Hills Village City Council. Today is Tuesday, September 20th, 2022. We'll have a roll call of members, please, Laura.
Counselor Safavi?
Here.
Counselor Rule?
Happy to be here.
Counselor Brown?
Here?
Counselor Gallagher?
Here.
Counselor Sheldon?
Here.
Counselor Blum is absent.
If we could all now rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We are going to, unless there's some objection, I'd like to propose that we reorder the agenda a little bit to allow everybody to speak in the most efficient way. And what I'd like to do is audience participation will wait until after the presentations. So that'll allow you to hear the presentations and then respond to them, okay? So if you've signed up on the sheet to speak,
There's 2 audience participation sheets.
oh, good, okay. So if you're signed up on the one that's not for the Quincy Farm,
Yes, you could certainly do that now.
we'll do that. We'll do that now. And then what I'll do, if you picked up the agenda coming in, we'll do the new business first, and then take the old business later, so you won't need to sit through the old business. Everybody can just speak here and get going. So Laura, if we have anybody to speak not on Quincy Farm. And I wanted to say too, when you're speaking on Quincy Farm, you're all welcome. We want to hear you all. But if somebody has already said what you've said, it's certainly appropriate to say, me too, I agree with them, and that's fine, because obviously that will happen as we're down the list. I do have 2 sign up for non-Quincy Farm. I'll hear those now. Tori Leventon to speak about land management.
Greetings, esteemed mayor, city council, city staff, neighbors, and guests. I speak solely as a resident of Cherry Hills Village. I have 2 handouts. I wanted a visual, but I can make it available to others if they'd like. At least council has it. And this was what I was preparing last time. I can at least show you. This is a map of our property on Quincy in Colorado. Observe how the plan is divided into built, mixed use, and simply wild. This is expected to be implemented next spring. We don't have it in place just yet. We just decided to do this about 3 months ago. Notice how we are ambitious in conservation, as the Paris Climate Accords and UN Conference on Sustainability both suggest a 30% conservation goal by 2030 to improve our ability to endure climate change and be resilient with protecting biodiversity. I encourage all residents with significant land plots to use this model as an example. Also, following Kat Anderson's last will and testament, direct donations to the city should also be considered. The next image is an aerial view of Cherry Hills Village from fall 2018. Notice how our community is already seemingly reaching the goals of 30% conservation, if not higher. This mosaic style is logistically the only way we can attain and or maintain the recommendations from the United Nations. Quincy Farm is also an excellent opportunity to emphasize the importance of wildlife and open space in our village. However the programming may shake out in the future, the Owl Sanctuary alone is around 30% of the farm, and there's ample room for expansion of conservation under this personal property land management model. I encourage further incremental exploration of how Quincy Farm can represent our whole village in the hopes of building a bigger coalition with similar communities in our state, our nation, and the whole world. Thank you all for your hard work. Wishing you a blessed week.
Thank you, Mr. Leventon. Next, we have Alex Brown. You're welcome to speak, and you're speaking on Resolution 26 that we're hearing later tonight, which also involves ballot issue 2A. You have, is it?
Sorry, Alex, I just realized because it's in a ballot issue. I mean, council can pass the resolution, but we can't use a forum to support or oppose any ballot issues.
Well, that was quick.
Well,
Sorry.
I understand.
Yep. Thanks for coming in. You're welcome to stay. All right. Next, if I could, without objection, I'd like to move to the new business, item 9A. Well, no, let's do consent agenda item first. I'm sorry. Item 6, consent agenda item. Does anyone wish to have anything removed?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that passes. Next, I'm moving to item 9A, which is new business, Cherry Hills Land Preserve Quincy Farm Annual Plan. City Manager Kramer, you have the floor now to present this.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Tonight, there's a proposal by the Cherry Hills Land Preserve for the 2023 annual plan for Quincy Farm. Council might recall that this follows a study session whereby the Land Preserve presented sort of an overview of their ideas. So tonight, I'm just going to provide a sort of a high-level overview. There'll be an opportunity for question and answer for staff, myself and the rest of staff. Then there'll be an opportunity for the Land Preserve to say whatever they'd like to say in addition to what they said last time. Then you'll have an opportunity for question and answer of them. And then I believe that's when the mayor is referring to the people who have signed up on the sign-up sheet for Quincy Farm will have an opportunity to speak at whatever time limit you so choose. So just to go through the staff presentation, this all started with a memorandum of understanding that was signed on December 8th, not signed, approved on December 8th between the City Council and Cherry Hills Land Preserve. Within that MOU, it basically outlines a process instead of laying out a 10 or 20-year plan, setting out an annual plan. And the idea being that the programming would help drive what goes into the next year's plan that would then outline maintenance costs, potential capital costs, et cetera. So you can see what the MOU specifically requires in the annual plan on those 4 bullets on the bottom, including any requests for the funds from the city. So that has not, we have not done that before. That's what tonight is. It will be the first annual plan. To get to tonight, staff and the Land Preserve have been meeting monthly, sometimes a little bit more. The Land Preserve also provided just an informational update on June 21st to City Council. The process resulted in a draft plan on August 26th, and then I referred to the study session at the very last council meeting on September 6th, whereby the Land Preserve was able to lay out with a lot more detail and thoroughness. On this screen is just an overview of what's included in the plan. It's just a high-level outline, if you will, laying out the vision, some of the guiding principles that are governing the formation of the plan, a discussion about public access within that, saying that there would be an opportunity for open access on the east side only for the 2023 plan, a number of initiatives regarding outreach, programming, I would say some minimal site improvements, and then some discussion about fundraising and grants. Just a quick note, the programming that is discussed, I think, is very consistent with the programming that's already been occurring on the site. It's rather robust, but this year's programming has been rather robust. So I think that's been a continuation of what the city and the community have seen on that side of it in regards to programming. There is a budget included in that, with including a potential request for a city contribution, and then an indication of contributions by the Land Preserve towards the project. And then finally, there's a discussion about the public access and how it relates to the conservation easement. Obviously, all of this has a relationship to Colorado Open Lands. Colorado Open Lands is the organization who is in charge of enforcement of the conservation easement. The conservation easement is the guiding document that limits how the property can be used. And so when we had the discussion on September 6th, Staff had yet to hear back from Open Lands on their input towards the 2023 annual plan. However, we did receive a response from them yesterday, and I believe I emailed that to council. In short, you can see a quote, they've reviewed the plan and have determined that overall, the uses, activities, and access proposed for 2023 are consistent with the terms of the conservation easement. So that's a pretty key piece, obviously, for when council's considering this particular annual plan. So with all that said, staff is recommending that City Council adopt the 2023 annual plan and allow for budgeting for the requested amount, but also then allow for the Land Preserve to begin moving forward on the work, the programming that they are proposing, and fundraising, additional fundraising that they are contemplating to be able to account for their contribution to the project. So that is really the extent of the staff presentation. Staff is available for any questions you might have.
Let's start with questions for staff, if there are any. Councilor Sheldon, anybody, any questions? Councilor Safavi?
Chris, if it's okay, are you guys going to go over the numbers or can I ask some questions?
You certainly can ask questions. Staff is not prepared to, we didn't include that proactively, but we absolutely can talk about the budget, yes.
You could ask now, or you could ask after the applicant presents.
I tell you what, why don't you go present the numbers and then I will come back if they're not answered. Go ahead.
So in short, the 2022 budget that you see on the top line here is the amount that the city basically spent for Quincy Farm. The request from the Land Preserve to the city is included in the $84,550 amount. And so that includes the general maintenance that we have already been performing anyway, so that's not really an increase per se. That's a continuation of what we've already been doing. But then there's other projects, including a feasibility study for the barn to understand what kind of improvements might need to be made there, as well as some, I would say, some maintenance, additional maintenance above and beyond the level that we've been performing thus far. And yeah, I don't have pulled up here, but we can certainly get the budget that's contained in and this was the budget that was in the staff memo. But if you're asking to see the budget that was in the annual plan, we can certainly pull that up.
Okay, just a question. So this is what our taxpayer is going to pay, right?
Yes, the 49,550 would be the additional over what the city has been investing into the property thus far.
Okay. So is Land Preserve going to be presenting the budget that they have put together? Who's presenting that today?
I don't think they were planning on doing that, but we certainly can pull it up and you can ask questions.
So let me go ahead and, Mayor, is that okay if I ask some questions? So I want to see if these are correct when I went through the numbers. Our taxpayers, citizens, our city, we're saying we're going to be putting a little bit around 85,000. I'm going to round the numbers, 85,000 for 2023. The total budget that's going to go toward Quincy Farm, I added up to be about $210K because there's about 130 that is coming or being committed by the Land Preserve, right? So 85 plus another 130 by the Land Preserve, about 210.
I am working on pulling up the agenda in the annual plan. Yep. So that may be true.
Okay.
I trust you on that. I have no reason to believe otherwise.
That's okay. So let me continue with that. So then when I look at the Cherry Hills Land Preserve contribution of 130K, almost 90,000 of that is for the operating cost. So out of the 130K that the Land Preserve wants to contribute through donation, 90,000 of it, 2/3 of it, is for operating costs, with 1/3 of it going to 50,000, going to the Cherry Hills Land Preserve Executive Director. So if we're basically, someone makes a $100 donation to our Quincy Farm, $30 of that A third of it goes toward paying Chapel Hill executive director. So what happens to the other, according to this plan, to the other 2/3? Well, another 1/3 gets spent on outreach, donor management system, development. I don't know what development is. So then that leaves a third of your donation that's supposed to go to Quincy Farm, which is about $40,000. So remember, we started with $210,000. $40,000 of it. $25,000 going to go to our feasibility study for the barn. So what does that mean? We're going to go ahead and put a bulldozer for the rest of the buildings? What are we going to do? We're not going to do a feasibility for the rest of the farm? So $25,000 just going to do feasibility. $13,000 that is going to go toward, $10,000 toward a monument, which the city, according to this, will pay $7,000 of it. $3,000 by land preserve. And then 4 signs will be put on entrances for $1,800 each. So I want to review this. What this is saying, our city is going to put $210,000 in 2023 toward Quincy Farm. What are we going to get out of it? Your tax money is going to pay to keep, basically make sure the grass gets mowed, all the general maintenance. The $130,000 that is hoping to come from donation, $50,000 going to go toward one person or whatever the salary. You're going to have about $30,000 or $40,000 website and outreach. And then you're going to have $25,000 toward getting assessment as how much would it cost to fix the barn? Not the entire Quincy Farm, just the barn. And then again, 4 signs at $1,800 each to put on each entrance. If anybody from Land Preserve or the city thinks my numbers are wrong, tell me. That's the budget.
I would maybe recommend until, I would say what other questions you might have, and then I'll allow them to say their opening remarks maybe, and then after that, there's an opportunity to respond to maybe a specific question like that, if that's okay.
Okay. Any other questions before we continue? Do we have a sign-up sheet then? Oh, no, wait, let the applicant go first, I'm sorry. And Linda, you have the floor. Take it away.
Thank you, Mayor Stewart. Thank you, City Council members. So we will address Afshin's concerns. Earl will talk to him a little bit about that. We didn't come to prepared to dive down into a more definitive situation for that Afshin, but we'd be glad to see what we can do to wrap our heads around that to help you, understand that. So I just wanted to say thank you to the City Council. I really wanted to say thank you to the city staff, Emily and Chris, who have worked with us over the last year, basically in complete collaboration to develop and design a comprehensive and inclusive plan focused on opening up public access to this incredible property. And I just wanted to say, as I said in the very beginning, it is a new day at Quincy Farm, and we are very excited and believe our 2023 plan will bring significant positive impacts to our community. We are all volunteers, all of us. We gain no personal benefit other than the same benefits received by our community. We at the Cherry Hills Land Preserve believe that this is our first step in our journey. We are not looking to create an attraction. We are looking to create a natural asset for our community. So I put now together, when our plan is approved, we need to roll up our sleeves and gather our collective ideas so we can create an environment and a stronger community connection through historic character, education, preservation, and enjoyment. This is an incredible gift that has been given to us by Cat Anderson, as we all know. We hope to bring awareness to our community and show everyone just how important, special, and unique this incredible gift is to all of us to protect and cherish now and in the future. And that is our goal. So it's not a very detailed or, there's no hidden agenda here. This is pretty much it. So thank you so much. Appreciate your consideration.
Thank you.
And obviously, you'll probably all have some additional questions, but to address Councilor Savavi, just to make sure first we're getting squared away. The $210,000, as I understand, you're basically adding the amount of money that the city will spend to the amount of money that Cherry Hills Land Preserve will do. So $210,000 is not taxpayer money. Taxpayer money is $85,000, of which $35,000 has been spent approximately every year on maintenance. It is the city's property, it remains the city's property, and the city needs to continue to take care of it. There is an additional approximately $50,000 of capital, which the Land Preserve has basically said, hey, let's put that in as part of what we're going to do and what we propose for 2023. And the Land Preserve is putting in, approximately $40,000 as well to that. The other 90, and we need to keep this is we're showing you what it is that the Land Preserve has to do in order to operate, program, fundraise, do the kinds of things that we need to do. Nobody's asking anybody to pay for that or what have you, but that is what this group of individuals is doing in order to carry out its functions under the MOU. We think that's important that you understand that. With regard to the capital that's raised or that's proposed for 2023, as Linda just said, it's a step as you go. We all know the muddled history of Quincy Farm as it relates to the city. I mean, and if you wanted to spend time talking about that, you could. But I'm just going to say, hey, 2022 and 2023, that is the start of Quincy Farms, if in fact you approve this plan. Councilor Savavi, you're an incredibly successful businessman. You had a really, really successful business in the medical profession. My guess is that when you first started to do that, we weren't talking about millions or billions of dollars. We were talking about tens of thousands of dollars that you invested as seed money into that business to get it going. That's what we're doing here with Quincy Farms. Last year, or this year, 2022, we had some nice programs going along, but now, operating with the MOU, we're going forward with the basis of saying, okay, let's move forward. Let's move forward and open the east side to public access, and if we can do that with our programming, then we will start on a step-by-step basis to start to talk about activating other pieces of the farm. The first part being the big barn. That is the center of the programmatic aspects associated with Quincy Farms. That was the thing that Kat Anderson, that was the heart and soul for her of the property. So from a feasibility study, which that is what actually is proposed to be done by the Land Preserve and paid for by the Land Preserve, if the feasibility study is successful, then hopefully we'll go forward to then design and construction documents, which then the city would pick up on that part. If the feasibility study is a bust, then we wouldn't do it. But what we want to know is what can be done with that barn? What would it cost? What would we be able to do to determine, should we spend some more money on it and go to the next step with a view to having it in operational state in 2024? And then in addition, no question that you would utilize that feasibility study for fundraising as well, and CHLP would utilize that. So that really is what's planned there, and while doing that, we would have our programming on the east side, we'd have programming conceivably on the west side, you'd have public access on the east side, and to get going and to have a first step to get that farm operating in a manner that we think is certainly consistent with the conservation easement, more importantly, consistent with what Kat Anderson wanted that place to be for the community. So that's my answer to your question, but if you want to have some more specifics, I'm happy to address them if I didn't touch on it.
Sure. Okay.
So Earl, thank you for that summary. Look, my biggest worries here is that I look at this budget, okay, the city budget, I can vote on that yes or no. I'm going to be odd number tonight. I'm going to vote no, just because I want to make a statement that I'm not happy with this. You guys are going to get the vote. The rest of them are going to say yes. But here's the thing. My worries here is that we started 3 years ago, 4 years ago, dismantling the Quincy Farm Committee, going through the whole dog and pony show to basically go get two RFPs, proposals, takes or whatever you want to call it, to get one of those proposals pushed through. And I remember over and over, we, the land preserve, we will work with everybody, and we will raise the money. All that rhetoric, right? Give me the MOU, and I will go raise the money. Last 2 weeks ago, well, if we can get a full easement and this and that, I think we have commitment, okay? So at this point, I am reluctant to fully believe that you're going to raise more than 100, 200, 300,000. Let's give you the benefit of the doubt. 200,000 next year you're going to raise. When that feasibility comes for the barn, it's going to be a pretty high number. So next year, you guys are going to be standing here. I'm not going to be a councilman, so you're going to have an easier time. But you're going to the team going to be standing here and say, it costs $500,000. You know what? We can get 200,000. City, can you give me 300,000? That is taxpayers' money. If you want to go it, and when we go talk about 100,000 to maintain something, that's one thing. When we're talking about very, very large dollars, I respect all the programs you're putting. I'm all about Cherry Hills Village and about the land preserve and about the programs. But I like to see where this thing is going. And after a year of being in charge, this is the budget. And it's not too convincing for me. The fundraising has not been very successful. So that's where I'm coming from, okay? That's where I'm coming from. I do have a problem with, again, these fees of, $90,000 for operating costs. Let me ask you this question. A $50,000 for Cherry Hills executive director, is that full-time or is it part-time? Is it 20 hours a week? How much is this individual spending time to actually manage this to get $50,000 a year?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that it's a part-time, but it's a lot of effort, because I don't think it's a full-time. Yeah.
20 hours a week? 200 hours a week?
No, not a week.
How many hours a week? Okay, 75%? Okay. So we're going to actually see somebody spend 75% of their time to feasibility study interior and exterior big barn, which is going to be probably some kind of a consultant who's going to be helping with that, and putting up 4 signs.
Right, but I think, Counselor, one of the things you have to, and by the way, everybody knows the esteem that I hold Ms. Black with. But if we weren't doing it, she would have to do it.
Okay.
And I also happen to know that Emily's got a lot of other responsibilities. And if she's spending her time doing that, you're going to need to hire somebody else to do those other responsibilities, or to assist her at the end of the day. Someone has to do this work. Okay, so that's number one. And again, to say that you would expect all of this to be done overnight, I think you're obviously entitled to your opinion, and I respect it, but it's not going to be done. And again, if you want to go back to where we started from the beginning, I think that's a waste of time, and it's certainly a waste of time with me, because I've got definite opinions about how the city got itself into this position. And you don't want to talk to me about that.
Right.
I don't think anybody really wants to talk to me about that. Okay? So I think the important thing to do is to focus on 2022 and 2023. And again, everything is driven by programming. But the other thing, which the Land Preserve has been very consistent in, as has the city, and rightfully so, until we can get public access and get our citizens on that farm, we're not going to spend any significant public dollars, which is what the city's done, and I have agreed with that, and we're not going to be able to raise the funding that we need to do it. We had to have public access. Our plan proposed in a stepwise fashion to have public access to the east side, along with programmatic activities on the east side and programmatic activities on the west side. And Colorado Open Lands came back and said they did not find that inconsistent with the conservation values. That's what we want to move forward on. We believe that we are going to be able to start with our active fundraising in that regard. And again, Linda and Judith can get up here and slap me down, but I'm telling you right now, if we sit back and go, hey, we want to restore that barn, and our terrific, terrific architect, Megan Walsh, comes back and comes up with a design. And yeah, and it's going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars at the end of the day, and it's supporting our program activities, and it is benefiting the community and Quincy Farms. I can assure you right now that the Land Preserve is not going to be sitting here saying, you pay for it all. That ain't going to happen. I'm telling you right now, it's not going to happen. We will be there to participate in a significant way on whatever that is.
Right. So Earl, let me respond to that quickly.
And as anybody's like shooting anything at me back here.
No, look, I respect and so Earl, I respect and I agree with what you're saying. The only thing that I've had issues with from day one has been when you're dealing with a project that can be extremely big.
Right.
Okay, you need to put not a 1 or 2 year plan. Even if it's an estimation, you put that before you go down the line to start, get the ball rolling. To just say, I hope I put it in, I'll put some program, eventually we get something going, I get, 5 people doing, I don't buy that. What I was hoping, what I've been asking for 12 months, which have been ignored over and over and over, is that come up with the estimate. Is it, and even you're off by twofold. If instead of 5 million, it's 10 million. If instead of 10 million, it's 4 million. Just get a handle of what this thing gonna cost. And understanding it has to do with the programming. But right now, you're going to go ahead and do this study, and not a year is lost. I mean,
a year isn't lost. A year will not. I disagree, Counselor. With all due respect, a year will not be lost. We're going to have even more extensive programming than we had in 2022, and I think everybody agrees that it was a pretty robust, to use the city manager's word, for 2022. It's going to be more robust for 2023. We're going to have our citizens being able to start going on the property. Moreover, the Land Preserve has a very extensive public outreach program going on right now to spread the word about Quincy Farms, to get people interested in Quincy Farms. And again, to be fair, the east side isn't as exciting and isn't beautiful as the west side, but hey, that's where they're going to have an opportunity to go. And through that process, we'll go to the next stage and the next level. But nobody knows at the end of the day where it's going to. We've got a vision in there, and Harold's in the background to talk about it in a way that nobody else can talk about.
So let me ask this. That exciting programming in 2022, how much donation did it bring you?
Well,
zero? What? No, I want to know in 2022, that exciting programs, how much money donation did it bring you? And so then I can believe that you're going to actually raise $130,000 of donation in 2023 before I commit, some of our money.
Counselor Afshin, I guess we haven't been authorized to have the job yet. I mean, can we get the job first? So as much as you would like to nail down the details of the costs involved and the money to be raised, our goal here is to get public access, open public access to the farm, so people in this community can, understand it and be aware of it and help join in to make something really special. Harold would like to talk.
Yeah, just a little bit to your point, Councilman. One of the things about the nonprofit sector in the Land Preserve support of Quincy Farms, there is no market demand for Quincy Farm. It is, in fact, an act of faith by a community that wants to better itself. And the only way you build confidence is to have a dedicated group that is willing to put money and ideas and vision on the table. And that the Land Preserve has done. But you can't raise money until you have an approved plan. The vision for Quincy Farm is very simple. The Quincy Farm has to look at as one incredibly valuable site with two pieces to it. One, the historic piece, the other, the natural piece. And those things have to interact. The Land Preserve has a proven track record in terms of doing this. and in terms of working with the city, thanks to the staff, in terms of coming up with an incremental baby step plan, which allows the land preserve to go to its advocates, to its members, to its friends, and say, we must begin. And we need to begin with putting private money on the table. It has already done that. It has secured commitments for that. The key is to have a successful 2023 plan. I do also know something about barns, and I think, in a sense, this has become a little bit of a red herring. The barn is the iconic symbol of Quincy Farm. To me, and I raised the question, and quite appropriately was shouted down, I don't think there is an issue of feasibility with the barn. It's feasible. The barn is an amazing and wonderful space, and it's not going to cost hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of $1,000s. But it seems to me, if we look at the vision and the baby steps, we are, in fact, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. And as an outsider who does have some experience with projects like this in the past, the key to the success of this project is really the drive and the dedication of the nonprofit sector represented by the Land Preserve here. And it seems to me down the road, overall, in my assessment of this project and its value, you will see consistently the public support of Quincy Farm going down because, in fact, the site will be simplified, it will be repaired, it will engage the community in the support of this activity, starting closest to home, but then going out into the philanthropic community and using their own passion and the fact their own money is on the table to then gain that larger support of the larger community.
So, sir, with all due respect, I heard the exact same speech from you a year ago when you were lobbying for them. So it's good. You're consistent, and that's fine.
Okay.
Okay?
Good. That's one point for me.
Okay, 12 months, in the past 12 months, it goes back to you said they have put their money in this and they have put their vision in this. I've seen their vision in this. Where's the money? You just said it. Where's the money?
You can't do fundraising until you have a plan.
Well, you said they have, so you're wrong. They have not.
There's no approved plan. I mean, if someone came to me and asked to contribute to a plan that had not been approved by the owner of the property, I would say, you've got to have your head examined.
Okay.
As soon as we have an approved plan, I will tell you, if they have not raised the money that they say they will raise for the 2020, I will take out a mortgage on my house, and I will put that on the record, sir.
I'm going to shut down now. Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Savavi.
Put it on the record.
I did want to move on. There'll be further time for you to comment in those motions, but I wanted the applicant to make sure that you got your full time in and anything else you wanted to say. If not, I mean, we did hear you last time, and that was a great presentation the last time you appeared. But if we want to move on to audience comments, we have had a lot of comments by mail, and so those are all part of the record. And so they're public record. Everybody can come and look at them. But we welcome everybody to speak and give your thoughts as well. And we have 19 signed up, and you're all welcome. And again, if you find yourself down the line saying the same thing as somebody else, you're more than welcome to stand up and say, "Me too," and I agree with Linda, I agree with Tom, or whatever. Susan McGuire, you're first on the list. Good to see you, and you have the floor. And I'm not going to. We'll keep it at 5 minutes, but please try to keep your comments too short, because be considerate of all your neighbors and everybody wanting to get home. But I'm not gonna break you off before 5 minutes. So go ahead.
Good evening. I'm Susan McGuire, 14 Mockingbird Lane. This is right in my, I either can be like not too close or I can't read my script. Thank you for allowing me 5 minutes to speak on what I believe is an important topic relating to the history and the identity of Cherry Hills Village. It's good to be here in front of City Council again. As you may recall, I was formerly the Executive Director of the Cherry Hills Land Preserve, although today I'm speaking in my personal capacity. You may not know, my husband Charlie McGuire was chair of the Quincy Farm Visioning Committee, formed in October of 2012, before the city was granted title to the farm. Interestingly, almost exactly 10 years ago. Many people in this room were in some way involved at that time. Katie Brown, Harriet Lamar, Laura Chrisman, and Clesina Vanderwolf were also on the Visioning Committee. Katie, Clesina, Alex Brown, and Russell Stewart were on City Council. Rob Eber and Mike Gallagher were on PTRC. Jay Goldie was Director of Public Works. The National Register of Historic Places lists Quincy Farm as, quote, a rare agricultural complex that has all but disappeared from urban Arapahoe County, end quote. The visioning report said, quote, its 17.5 acres can provide an example of early farm life in Arapahoe County while enriching the community by providing new and vital recreational and educational opportunities, end quote. The visioning report recognized that Quincy Farm can be a large contributor to the city's master plan by preserving and fostering the rural character that is the essence of our community identity. While Quincy Farm presents the village with enormous responsibilities in the form of maintenance and management expenses, our community will gain back from the farm the kind and degree of value that we are willing to invest in it. The property provides a connection to the historic richness of our village, an opportunity to explore our relationship to nature and the wildlife around us, and a chance to engage on the topics of sustainability and conservation. So, prior to the city taking control of the property, the Visioning Committee conducted a strategic analysis of Quincy Farm and made recommendations as to the care, management, and improvement of the property. Some of the recommendations were undertaken relatively quickly once the city took title to the property upon Cat Anderson's passing. Land was rezoned, and various studies were conducted to assess the condition of the property and various buildings on it. Some recommendations made by the Visioning Committee were not undertaken quite so quickly, including the recommendation that the city partner with civic organizations to open the farm to public access through the offering of active programming and experiences. I am happy to see that today the city is voting to formally open the farm to the public with active programming offered through the Cherry Hills Land Preserve. However, I encourage the city to go further. The city needs to enter into a formal operating agreement pursuant to which the Land Preserve manages the property on behalf of the city and pursuant to which both the Land Preserve and other organizations can offer programming and hold events in accordance with the terms of the conservation easement and the terms of the operating agreement. This agreement should lay out clearly the expectations as to annual budgets and responsibilities. Having a formal agreement in place, having a formal agreement as opposed to an MOU will enhance CHLP's fundraising efforts and provide assurances to CHLP in connection with risks it takes in its relationship with the city and the farm. I firmly believe the Land Preserve is the right partner for the city with respect to Quincy Farm. I believe there are families and organizations both within the city and outside of the city who support the Land Preserve and who will support Quincy Farm, and that the farm can be turned into a crown jewel of the city, a community center on the east side that will bring people together to learn and engage, and a dedicated natural landscape and wildlife habitat space on the west side, perfect for more isolated appreciation and contemplation. We are underutilizing this wonderful gift and owe it to the legacy of Cat Anderson and to the citizens of this village to optimize this gift. Thank you for the time to speak tonight. I strongly support and encourage you to vote in favor of the Quincy Farm Annual Plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. McGuire. Next sign up is Steve Shovey.
Thank you. My name's Steve Scovey. I live in the Cherrydale neighborhood, which is right across the street of Quincy from Quincy Farm. We have 34 homes in that community. I believe we're the largest, closest neighbor to the farm. We have a vital interest in what happens over there and want to be supportive, I might add. I'd like to read part of a memo that I did send, and I believe you've all had a chance to read, but I want to emphasize some things. I attended a meeting with Cherry Hills Land Preserve representatives, several of whom are here, and Dr. Scramstead on March 7th. The session was recorded, so it should be on the record. Several important principles were discussed there, and I think agreed to, and I really just want to highlight those. Because to the extent they're adhered to, I think our neighborhood could get behind the plan. But to the extent not, and that we deviate from those, our close neighbor is not going to be happy with the direction all this takes. I reported those key principles to our neighborhood shortly after the meeting. First question I asked at the meeting was, who does the Cherry Hills Land Preserve represent in their oversight of Quincy Farm? And the answer was Cherry Hills Village. I was very happy to hear that. I think we need to keep our mind focused on that. We're not here to represent Arapahoe County, the city of Denver, the state of Colorado. We're here for Cherry Hills Village. Second point, which Dr. Scramstead mentioned, is this is to be an amenity for the community. It's not to be an attraction for people from all over the city to come here. Our neighborhood would be quite concerned if that's what this turns into. It should be a limited access, third point, limited access, light touch type given to the site, principally in open space with a small amount of educational programming. There should be limited parking, and it should be gated with no access before sunset or after dark. So, you know, as we're talking about access to both sides, I wonder what that means, because to us, access during the day, fine. We'd be concerned, particularly with the buildings there and so forth, that 24/7 access is probably not a good idea. It was also mentioned that the vision should be embraced by the Cherry Hills community. So I think it's great we're having these discussions. Again, my biggest fear is that the people we're trying to embrace here are the people outside our community as opposed to the ones in our community. So I guess one of my concerns also is the fundraising. Where's this going to come from? I think the funding should largely come from inside the community in a charitable way. To the extent we start reaching out to other communities to fund this activity, those are going to come with strings attached that are not going to serve the interests of Cherry Hills Village. And I think that's what my neighborhood is concerned about. We're also concerned about mission creep here. You know, let's have a limited activity that's going to take place here that also, to me, goes with a limited budget. And let's make this a beautiful open space with a couple of buildings, perhaps, but let's not get carried away with what we try and make this, because I think that'll end up hurting our community as opposed to helping it. So if Cherry Hills Land Preserve and this council can adhere to those principles, then our neighborhood is all on board. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shelby.
Mayor, real quick question. Hey, Steve, Mr. Scovey, real quick question. Are you here representing the neighborhood? Are you the president of the HOA? Are you here in a capacity representing the whole community?
Yeah, it's a good question. I have taken up this issue for our neighborhood for the last 2 years. I'm in close contact with the HOA, and I am here representing the neighborhood. And hence I speak, I write letters, I report back to the neighborhood, and this is the position of the neighborhood.
Thank you.
Yes. Mhm.
Next sign up is Heather Fox. You may approach.
I too am a resident of Cherrydale. My address is 4220 South Bel Air Circle, and my property backs up to Quincy directly across from the east entry. Access, 24-hour access, has me concerned because it not only means daytime, it means nighttime. And nighttime is also a time when there can be merriment and mischief and vandalism. And I am questioning whether that property is properly protected. Are there burglar alarms on the east house? Are there burglar alarms on the barn? Are there fire alarms currently there? Because I think we need to make it a safe place at night. And I am not in favor of having it open after sunset. I think that there should be some kind of a gate. Everything else in the world now works electronically. Surely we can find some kind of a gate that shuts at night and doesn't require a policeman being there all the time. So those are a few of my suggestions. And I don't want to see that that property is open and the chicken coop winds up being a home for the homeless, because that could very easily happen. And then they could maybe want to cook their dinner on a little stove, and then we might have a little fire, and all those buildings are frame. So I think we need to do a lot more in terms of security if we are going to have it open day and night. Thank you.
Thank you for coming, and thank you for your comments. We'll have a motion. No, it's okay.
I was just going to make a mention for the benefit of those in the room that the access in the plan is from sunrise to sunset on the east side of the farm, and with no access currently proposed for the west side. So there's no 24-hour access, Ms. Fox, wherever you just.
Well, and then our parks generally are 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. in Cherry Hills Village, but this is a sunrise to sunset proposal for 2022 in this plan. Okay. Next, we have Becky Bennis.
My name is Becky Bennis. I live 12 Blackmer Road. I am one of the east neighbors. I back up to Quincy Farm. It's interesting to me that in all of your committees, and you, sir, city manager, no one ever thought to talk to the east neighbors who are most affected by this. Okay, what I would like to say is be careful what you wish for. That's what I said 4 years ago when you were considering, this same city council was considering the roundabout. You had been led to believe that the roundabout would solve all of your problems. It would solve all of Kent's problems, the parking, it would all go away. Well, this is the same city council that is considering opening up Quincy Farm. So remember the roundabout. They were only stopped, you were only stopped from doing the roundabout because of an overwhelming citizen initiative. I'm not threatening, but I'm suggesting that maybe you should have talked to the east neighbors. Maybe you should have included them. Maybe the Cherry Hills Land Preserve. And isn't that a contradiction of terms? That maybe the Cherry Hills Land Preserve should have talked to some of the closest neighbors. Gordon Rockefeller, I think he's going to speak too, is surrounded on 3 sides by Quincy Farm. And yet no one's even considered talking to any of the neighbors. Well, so anyhow, I think I have a lot to say about breaking the easement. I think that, all over the country, people are doing conservation easements. In the paper this morning, even Douglas County, can you believe it? Douglas County, they're forming a conservation easement between Larkspur and Monument Hill. It was in the paper today. And so here you are breaking an easement. You're not exactly with the times, are you? Okay. Finally, I'd like to remind City Council and Cherry Hills Land Preserve, none of whose members live near Quincy Farm, that we were robbed 2.5 years ago. Someone came in from the back, smashed a window, our bedroom window, took all of my jewelry, my mother's mink coat, took a pillowcase off the bed, filled it. If that can happen when Quincy Farm is protected, what do you think is going to happen when this is opened up? Dawn, I'm appalled. I'm against it. And you haven't heard the last of me.
Thank you for your comments. Next, sign up. I may not be able to read this. Is it Rich? Rich. Rich, welcome.
My name's Rich Bear, married to Linda, so there's a little bit of a push there. I have to guard my remarks or I'll be sleeping with the dogs tonight. Okay. How do you pronounce your name? Ashvin? Thank you for your remarks. I'm a finance guy. I sit on a board of a college, and often I'm the no on the board, okay? There is only 100 cents in the dollar, okay? But I want to split the baby here and have you think about something. 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, you just have this inevitable push of population growth, and unless you drive a stake in the ground, that property is going to go away. It's going to evaporate somehow, okay? Now, right now, we are left with, the way I see it, it's kind of a football term. It's like an option play. They're running without the ball, okay? You gotta give them a contract to start plays, to start the project, to start the fundraising. They're going to make mistakes. There's going to be headaches that go with this. It's not without headaches. But open space, you're only going to get one chance at open space, not two, one. So when I was confronted with something like this on my board, I would insist on a yes vote with provisions. So as I hear, I think are very valid objections, I didn't think about the parking that's on the north side, and that side of the road could get swarmed by people. So you have to build in what I refer to as governance. I haven't really heard a lot about governance. In the governance is the board. Is the budget. And, $50,000 for a startup, the answer to that is simple. It's no, we don't have the money. But the constraint to build out, and I think your ask, and I think it's a valid ask, is a longer-term business plan. But you got to give them a start point. That's all I'm saying. And with a little bit of, before you abandon, it would seem to me a little bit of collaboration from you all on the finance side would start to really start the ball rolling, where you could have quite literally I'm going to call it a public-private partnership to get the funding that's necessary for, if you will, the reconstruction of that property. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I just would like to remind that we do need name and address for every speaker for the record, for the minutes.
And I have them here, but
Okay,
if I don't have them here, I will ask.
Perfect, thank you.
Howard. Scrims.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Howard Shermer. My wife and I have lived at 4100 East Quincy Avenue for the last 30 years. We are in very close proximity to Quincy Farm. In fact, our lane easement cuts right through Quincy Farm's property. I have several points to cover this evening. Our understanding on the public access issue in the West area in particular was based on a letter from Kat Anderson's lawyer. After meeting with Kat and her lawyer, it stated that within the West area, conservation easement generally permits a nature preserve, and then it goes on to list a few other things, but more importantly, recreational uses such as trails and hiking are not permitted in the West area. It was on this basis that we gave up many of our property rights in order for the 4-lot subdivision to help Kat craft the conservation easement. Without our permission, we probably would not be here tonight. Note, specifically, she indicated no trails and hiking in the West area. My second point, the Cherry Hill Land Preserve's 2023 plan includes a budget for additional signage in the West area. If there are no trails and hiking, why do we need to spend money for signage? The plan also provides a budget for developing a website. A website would only expand the use of the East area in 2023. For villagers, yes, but also for those who live outside the village. It would increase traffic on Quincy, which is now a congested, high-traffic street. In fact, turning in from Quincy to our lane, we've been rear-ended 2 times. Note, the plan and budget should be modified to eliminate these 2 items. Traffic down our little lane will increase for sure, especially as there's no parking now planned for the farm. There are times when it can take up to 10 minutes for us to get out of our lane onto Quincy. As it is now, we have many that come down our lane looking at Quincy Farm, both in cars, bikes, and walking. The 4 property owners pay to maintain our lane. This is a slippery slide. It is inevitable that parking will be needed. Note, we do not need a Greenwood Village silo park in Cherry Hills Village, and the large number of people that it attracts. With more people comes more crime. There have been 3 crimes in recent times in the immediate area that I know of. One Becky just mentioned. Note, there will be a need for more police to patrol the farm, both during the day and also the night. My last point, special interests in the backroom dealings biased the RFP process. In my 50-plus years of dealing with engineering procurements around the world, I have never, ever seen an action by any government body to modify the selection criteria after the proposals were submitted. Unfair, unethical, and possibly corrupt. Thanks for listening to me.
Thank you for your comments. Appreciate you coming tonight. Next, Klasina Vanderwerth, who is still at 5250 East Shenango Avenue.
Well, you took away my first comment, so. Mayor and members of council and city staff, I just wanted to say I think that the Quincy Farm plan is excellent. I like the way that they draw us into it, showing us buildings and what they will look like in the future and how they will be used. And I think it's totally appropriate that this first year is spent assessing the needs, assessing the physical, the structural needs of Quincy Farm. I also think it is absolutely the right decision to remove the main house on the west side as allowed by the conservation easement. Attempting to remodel that structure so that it could be used would be a colossal task with a cost to match. And also, the things that that building could provide, the uses, can be provided by other buildings. I think the approach the land preserve is suggesting for opening the property is the right one. And the justification the land preserve gives for this approach is also on target. I think that the city's initial attempt to open the property was too much too soon, and I think it got the city off on the wrong foot with Colorado Open Lands. I would like to just say a couple of things in response to some of the comments that we've heard this evening. And I think one of the best examples of the fundraising potential that we have in Cherry Hills Village is shown through the Highline Canal Conservancy. If anybody looked at the books of the Conservancy and looked at the names of the people who were on that list, well, you would find my name. You would find, and I think Harriet would say most of those people are from Cherry Hills Village. If they're willing to give to the Highline Canal, I'm absolutely certain they're willing to give to Quincy Farm. We live on a property that has trails on two sides, and I know I've heard people in our neighborhood even say, makes me nervous to have a trail because of the people who go by. And I feel just the opposite way. In fact, I think I've got a bunch of neighborhood eyes on my property. And if somebody is doing something they shouldn't be doing, I'll hear about it. And I think the same could be said about Quincy Farm. We'll have some friendly people on the property engaged in activity, and if they observe anything going on other properties, something will be said. And then maybe one final comment, and this maybe is for those people who were not in the village when we excluded from South Suburban Parks and Recreation District. You know, many of us, and actually Quincy Farm was coming into the hands of the city at about the same time. And many of us saw this Quincy Farm as an opportunity to sort of make up for what we were losing by excluding from South Suburban. And we certainly got the funds from South Suburban. I think it's about $2 million a year. Is that about right? That it was for trail maintenance and park maintenance, but it also was to add to our open space. And so I think that we have sort of a built-in funding source for Quincy Farm. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina, for your comments and coming tonight. Next up is Michael McAllister on 4140 East Quincy Avenue.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. I live at 4140 East Quincy, immediately adjacent to Quincy Farm. And as a relatively new member of the community, I've only purchased this piece of property 2 years ago. It's been interesting to watch this unfold from a variety of different angles. But I think I can summarize from a somewhat fresh perspective, and that is that when a community has been the way it's been for a long time, there's a lot of uncertainty if there's not a clear vision that's put out. It plays a little bit to your comment, Councilman. And as a business person, and you wrap some logic around it, we really need a longer-term plan. People get uneasy when there's ambiguity and grayness, and then you couple that with a lack of financial resources. It's somewhat frustrating. So personally, I've experienced what feels like a lack of resources from the city as it relates to maintenance of Quincy Farm. And even just the discussion of tearing down the main house, I don't know that that's, I guess that's to be, right? So things are changing, but I don't know that it's been clearly laid out. There's clearly a safety concern that I think we should address. And probably first and foremost, I would really suggest that the Cherry Hills Land Preserve and or the city staff really engage some of these neighbors that are immediately adjacent to the property to get them engaged in the process. That said, there may have been notices to come to meetings, be part of groups, but I would just suggest a more proactive approach and really encourage those people to get involved so we demystify the process. And then lastly, if we can just come up with a longer term plan that has some larger numbers, even something, if we're going to tear down the house, we need to budget for that, right? We need to plan for it, et cetera. So I really respect this community and the longevity in it and the soul that people feel for it and that these people care. But right now there's just a lot of change and a lot of ambiguity that's undefined and unfinanced. So if we could mitigate that, I think that would go a long ways. But as an optimist, I believe that progress usually is progress, and there's a bunch of smart people in this community who will figure it out. So I want to, give my support to the Cherry Hills Land Preserve in terms of let's get rolling, let's build a plan, and then let's get some money wrapped around it because it's going to cost more and take more time than anybody ever probably imagined.
Thank you. Thank you for your smart comments. Appreciate your coming tonight. Next, is it Virgil Silas at 4140 East Quincy Avenue? Nope. Okay. Janet Kreitzer. Janet, Miss Janet. She here? 34 Sedgwick, correct?
34 Sedgwick.
All
I'm
right.
Janet Kreitzer. I live at 34 Sedgwick. I back to the Highline Canal and have for 28 years. And we have gone through any number of things with the churches and the parking lots there, and then also this new monster Hamden underpass. Nobody in our neighborhood was ever consulted. Everybody totally freaked out. We're going to be robbed. We actually went to try to get 8-foot fences approved all along. Well, it's been a year now, and none of these things have materialized, and we haven't had droves of people or electric bikes or scooter coming through. And I think what the beauty of Cherry Hills is our open space. We are the only island in the city that is surrounded by development, and it's going to continue and continue. And you come here and you feel peace, your blood pressure goes down. I believe our mandate is to preserve the rural quality of life, and I think the Quincy Farm represents all of that. And I know how neighbors feel and worry about robberies. We've had tons of robberies in our neighborhoods. They happen all the time in Cherry Hills. It's Cherry Hills. It happens particularly with people of opportunity. It's going to happen regardless of whether or not there's a parking lot there or not. The sunrise to sunset is perfect. We went for years planning Mead Park. People worried that it was just going to be this giant public attraction. There's rarely anybody here, but it's beautiful. And I think that whatever Quincy Farm costs, whether it's even all of our taxpayer dollars, it adds so much value to our community that it's well worth any and all plans that you go through in a vote. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for your comments. Next, Gordon Rockefeller. Gordon.
Thank you, Mayor and council people and the people attending here. I live at 4200 East Quincy. Have been there for about 30 years, a little more than that. I'm going to talk a little bigger question here. Sometimes there are assets that you really don't want to own, like the 3 boroughs that my wife decided to adopt several years ago. In this case, the city has taken on this responsibility to operate the farm, provide this restoration, that a lot that needs to be done, some of which is not so visible as is the barn. For example, the pond needs a lot of work and a lot of money spent. It's a liability risk now, a flood liability risk. We've got insurance on our house for flood insurance. Does the city have liability insurance now on that pond for the same reason? Why not, if not? I just don't think that it necessarily makes sense for the city to continue to own this property, particularly if the partners that they're going to entrust to manage it are not funded adequately to do the restoration work that needs to be done. Members of this council, as well as other candidates running for office, have claimed that they're going to run the city or contribute to having it run with fiscal responsibility. I hope they bring to bear all their financial analysis skills to find out whether or not the city ought to own this property. I hope that the Cherry Hills Land Preserve, I wish them well, they're well intended. I hope they're successful with their fundraising effort, but I don't see it materializing now. And I do see the need to plan for a lot of work that I don't think that they even realize is going to have to be done. At the same time, does it make sense to entertain motions that are going to make it harder to transfer ownership if that's the right decision? That doesn't make any sense to me. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments and coming tonight. James Creepow.
Yes, my wife and I live at 4650 South Forest Street, and our property backs up to the farms, and we actually have a chance to. We're just south of it, and I can tell you that we are in complete support of this project. It's something that we'd look forward to. We frequently walk north on the trail, and these. The access to the property have had these signs with no trespassing for years. And last Saturday it was open for 2 hours. We had a wonderful time visiting the farm. It's an extraordinary property and an extraordinary opportunity. And I think that many of the worries that we've heard about are worries that all should be addressed and considered, but I think we'll find out that our community loves the space, takes care of it, and we'll find that it's a place of enlargement and beauty for our community. And I think that many of our fears will not come out because we have, for example, I went on the west side of the property. It's beautiful, and I think it should be opened eventually. But it joins right onto the Kent Denver property, and you see people walking. In fact, we walked across a couple days ago with open access, and I've never seen a problem in that area, even though lots of people walk on trails across that property with the same experience. And this would blend with it and build our community. So I just want to tell you that we're completely in support of this action to invest in it. And in fact, we'll be one of the people that helps invest in making it a success with money. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the Your generosity, too. Earl, you set up next to you. Would you like to speak? Or? Oh. I'm just surprised. Philip Seawalt.
Philip Seawalt, 4751 South University Boulevard. I completely support what the Cherry Hills Land Preserve is doing, and I encourage council to vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Meg Walsh. Yeah. You got it. No comments. Okay. And Rob Eber.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Good evening, staff. My name is Robert Eber. I live at 3 Middle Road. I am pleased to say that I've been a 50-year resident of Cherry Hills Village. I'm 61 years old, but raised in Cherry Hills, smart enough to come back afterwards. Our family has a special and unique tie to this property that we're talking about. My sister was lucky to be a Pony Club girl and grew up with Kat and many of her lessons. And in fact, she is a much, much better human being as a result of the many lessons that Kat provided to her. We grew up rafting in the canal that goes right past this and through this property. It wasn't necessarily loved by Denver Water, but at the same time, that's what we did. It is truly a treasure when somebody gives you for free a 17 or many acre piece of property like this one is. It is a crown jewel that looks back to our history and provides an opportunity for us to go forward with a firm understanding of what life used to be in Cherry Hills Village. And to that end, I do want to plug Clausina's book because anybody here who has not read it ought to read it. High on Country, please read it. I am in full support of the plan proposed tonight. It is not perfect, and we know it. It is a beginning to crawl and even walk, as we soon will be running with this property. My biggest comment to you, other than the comments that you have heard before, is that from a financial perspective, you know that I sit on Parks and Trails, and we were involved with the Mead Park Master Plan, and we sought extensive public comment and received a great deal, as has this plan and the involvement for Quincy Farms. I know there has not been direct one-on-one approaches to many of the neighbors, as you have heard tonight, but the opportunity for public comment has in fact been there, and many people have taken advantage of it. I would like to tell you that as a result of my involvement with Parks and Trails, I have gotten a chance to become familiar and expert, frankly, with the budget for our Parks Fund. I am extremely confident in our funding amount that can handle this project should it be entirely funded by the city. It is only so often that you have an opportunity to receive a treasure like this, and with that treasure comes a responsibility to take care of it. Can we take care of it? Absolutely, we can. Can it be even made more simple by the assistance of the Land Preserve and private funding? Absolutely. Are there co-funding grants out there? Absolutely. This is not an economic issue for this city to be curious about and hesitant about. It is something that will come of age. It will come with an opportunity to respond to many of Councilor Safavi's comments for a longer-term budget. But we have been up and down on this project for 10 years now. And in order for me and all the other people to say that we are absolutely in support of keeping this treasure that has been given to us, I don't want to see it sold off when we talk about Mr. Rockefeller's comments of whether we really want it or not. The last thing I think we need is 4 more houses at the expense of the loss of what it is that we have there. I'm not putting any responsibility on having more homes in the village, but this is a treasure and we need to keep it. And For the amount of money, we're talking about less than 1% of the value of the farm during 2023, and I think it would be an absolute shame if we didn't move forward. We will find the money to do everything that is needed to make a world-class property at Quincy Farms. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Laura Chrisman.
Laura Chrisman, 18 Cherry Lane Drive. I'm in support of the plan set forth by the Land Preserve. But really, I want to talk about two things. One, I think the majority of people gave very constructive criticism, and whether I agree with it or not, it was constructive. Many of the emails that came in had constructive criticism. I will now address a couple things that I don't think are constructive. One is an allegation that this city is violating the conservation easement and breaking it. It is not. I will tell you that if there's one thing that this city staff would not do is violate the conservation easement, and they would not have presented anything to you that did so, and this is confirmed by COL. The second is allegations that people on the land preserve or on this dais or maybe sitting in front of the microphone have a personal benefit from this. And secondly, that apparently there was some corruption involved in earlier decisions on the part of this council. Those are unfair. You cannot respond to those, but I can. I may never have agreed with each one of you on everything, but I have a great deal of respect for the fact that each of you as volunteers are working very hard to do what you think is best for this city. Whether or not I agree with that or not, that does not, and it is not fair to throw an allegation of corruption at this council. The next thing is it is not fair to throw an allegation that people on the land preserve have a personal benefit from this, except for the fact that maybe they are, because they have worked as volunteers, and there's only explanation for that is they enjoy open space, they enjoy helping out the city, and if that's a personal benefit, that's the benefit they've gained. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chrisman, for your comments. Anybody else wish to speak? If you could state your name and your address, please.
My name is Jen Diffendahl, and my address is 5701 East Stanford Drive. Thank you guys all for being here. What I want to say is just remember that this is a legacy that we are all trying to create and be contributors of. There's such a long history of passion that everyone has discussed in this room. And we are so lucky to have this gem of a treasure that's in the heart of our city. But I want to say, remember that this is 58% of our open lands out of the 30 acres that's city owned. And all the volunteers, I want to say thank you as a resident for everything that you do. We all have our passions and we all contribute, and that we are so lucky to have that. But I want you to remember too, that communication with neighbors around and the thoughtfulness around this, around parking, around safety, around public access, about the gift that Kat Anderson gave all of us. We have to remember what the end goal is. The end goal is so that all of our children and generations to come will benefit from this. And we may disagree on how it works, but guess what? We have all been volunteers in here, and we all are contributors. And I just want to say that keep going. I think that this plan, even though I disagree with some of it, I think you got to keep going. It's a great starting point. Startups are messy. I know this has been a 10-year long labor of love of a lot of ups and downs, but keep going. Because what's at stake is our community and the one place that we all can have sustainability, education, get to know our neighbors, and have long-term relationships and bonds. So keep going, and thank you for everything that you guys do. As you guys know, safety is so important to me. I've had 2 break-ins in my home. And what concerns me about this property is the safety and the underpass of Hampden. One thing to consider as we move forward is when you say public and public access, that does not mean just our community. That means everywhere. And just have some thoughtfulness around that. The Hampden underpass does make more traffic, and it makes it a thoroughfare. And on that thoroughfare is Quincy Farms. And there's not abandoned, but vacant buildings on Quincy Farm. And just be considerate of that as we move forward, of what that means for neighbors, what that means for our community, and at the speed we should go to get those renovated to up to code to be safe. Thinking about gating, things like that. Those are the things that are so important. But also remember, embrace the goal. The goal is to beautify our place, to make it safe, to make this a place that's a labor of love, and to make it community oriented. So I want to say thank you guys for all that you do, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Anybody else wish to speak? I don't want to let anybody say they couldn't. I've had requests to take a break, but for 3 minutes and then come back. But I'm going to proceed on regular process then, and then we'll entertain a motion and a second, and then we can have a discussion and then vote. So, by request of a council member here, we're going to take 3 minutes and be right back. I'm not saying who.
Chocolate break.
You're awesome. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Well, I'm counting on,
Hi. All right. You're welcome. Anytime you get a snake like that, I'm the man. Call me. Dead bull snake. It was already dead. Kids probably. Bad. They're nice snakes. She wanted to know, if we could call the code enforcement in the city to do it. I said, no, I can really take care of that snake. It's okay. I said I grew up on a farm. I know about this stuff. We used to bail them. When we baled hay, they get in the bales and they get baled up. Okay, it is 8:08. We're back after a short recess. I will proceed now. I'll entertain a motion in a second. We'll have discussion then, and I'll have a vote. If we get everybody's attention, please.
I move to approve the Cherry Hills Land Preserve 2023 Annual Plan for Quincy Farm and direct staff to work with the Cherry Hills Land Preserve to implement the plan.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion, Councilor Sheldon. Any thoughts, comments?
Thank you, Mayor. I think we're at a real good point right now in this project, and I am going to be voting yes on this, but I want to do so with an ask of the Land Preserve and an ask of our own staff. I'd like for you all to work with the immediate neighbors. I've heard it not once, not twice, but multiple times tonight that there are a number of neighbors that have not been communicated with, and whether that's true or not, it appears that they haven't, and we need to have that public outreach. We do. In any project that we do that's a city-sponsored project, we owe it to our neighbors, especially those who are most impacted. So I would ask that the Land Preserve and our staff coordinate together. I'm not asking to amend our motion at all. I don't want to muck up the motion, but I would like it in front of my 50 closest friends here in the room for you all to hear this, that I would like for staff and the Land Preserve to work with those neighbors on Quincy Avenue. We heard from a number of them, or all of them tonight, as well as the Benesses and those on the east side of the farm, as well as those on the north side of Quincy that are immediately backing up. I think they deserve it, and let them be part of the discussion. Let them be part of the detail as you work out those finer points. With that, I'm going to support this action tonight.
Councilor Gallagher?
My plan is to support this motion, and I would like to thank the volunteers of the Cherry Hills Land Preserve and the time and the effort, the countless hours. I know you guys have worked hard, and I just want to publicly acknowledge that. Two, as one who has participated in the activities of Quincy Farm, I've had the opportunity to deal with the executive director at times, and she is worth her weight in gold. And finally, I think that this project is going to provide this community challenge and many opportunities to contribute and make this a better place. Thank you.
Councilor Brown?
I said it at previous meetings, and I'll repeat that I am very excited. Thank you to everyone in the room who came, whether you're in support or not. These are the types of discussions our community needs in order to move forward. And thank you to the Cherry Hills Land Preserve. There have been many starts and stops and attempts. There have been many sets of people who have put together plans that haven't worked for one reason or another. I'm delighted that we now have a plan that we can move forward with that has the support of Colorado Open Lands as the easement holder, that has the support of the community. And so I'm just excited that we're at this point. I agree there will be more fits and starts to come. It will not be a smooth road, and I know that the people in this room have the dedication and the commitment to see us through all of that. I pledge to do my part in that as we move forward in whatever capacity that may be. And so thank you to everyone, and let's get it going on.
Councilor Wheel?
Thank you. It's been a journey. I think I tend to look at these things sort of long view. I don't see it as a one-year budgetary issue. And when I look forward even farther than the plan walkthrough, I think it can be a real gem. And as a guy who's done some restructuring in his career, I go to the board of directors with all kinds of long-range plans and know that I can't know what's in, that I can, that'll all materialize the way that I've presented it, but I do my best to make it happen. I have confidence in the Land Preserve and their willingness to make it happen one way or another. And I share Katie's comments as well. Thank you to all of you in the room here, because it is so refreshing to really get firsthand input from the community on matters that are important to the community. So I intend to support. Thanks.
As I stated earlier, my vote will be no. And the reason for that is I've been asking for about a year, since day one. Go find a CFO. There are more CFOs. The smartest CFOs you find in the country are in Cherry Hills Village. You find more CFOs per square mile than any other place than in Cherry Hills. And I asked you, go find a CFO to actually put a financial modeling for you together. You know why? Because with financial modeling comes directions, comes commitment, and accountability. Today I don't know your direction. There's a vision. By the way, if you have financial modeling, it doesn't mean you cannot change it. But it brings everybody and keeps everybody on the same page. In terms of commitment, if there was a financial model that, I'm going to try to raise $50,000 this year, $100,000 next year, $200,000, there's a goal you're working towards. So I'm like, okay. So there's no commitment you're making. And then accountability. What am I going to hold you accountable? Next year, you're going to stand here, I had 14 GOAT programs and GOAT Javelin or whatever else. I can't hold you accountable because there was no financial modeling. It's as simple. So I want Cherry Hills, this Quincy Farm to work. I want the Land Preserve, I wish you the best. I hope you guys can do the fundraising. But if nothing else, again, just go find a CFO, put a financial model, and that will save you a lot of time and headache, but it will hold you accountable. With that, again, you already got all the votes you want. Mine going to be no for that reason.
I just have a few comments. First of all, thank you for coming tonight, and thank you for all of your interest in this, because it's really important. first of all, I hope you all, everybody joins the Cherry Hills Land Preserve, and I hope you all give generously, because that's what we need. And by full disclosure, I was on Cherry Hills Land Preserve. I was on the executive committee. There was a time, I knew when it was created. It was created to preserve certain large parcels of property here. There was a time when, Jenny's here, that we were looking at all the large properties had mostly been protected or as it was. So we were looking around at, who's going to turn the lights out? What's going to happen with this organization? But at the same time, we had Quincy Farm, and it is clear, apparent, that Quincy Farm couldn't succeed. It's too big a project for the city. It has to have partnerships, and it has to have involvement from the citizens and the residents here. That's the only way it can succeed, is to be a partnership with Carl Open Lands, with the residents, with the neighbors, with the city. Everybody needs to be on board on a vision and a common plan. And that's the way it's going to work. And when I was on council, as you heard, when we took this property, and we had concerns. We knew that this was it's going to be a big lift for the city, because there was no endowment. And I talked to Kat Anderson. I talked with her half a dozen times in her house, seeing out about this property and her thoughts. The one regret she had is there was no endowment. She didn't leave us with an endowment. A lot of these properties like this have endowments. We didn't. That poses a huge challenge for our village, because we don't have money. We don't have any commercial areas like Greenwood Village. We don't have huge budgets. We're only a $10 or $11 million budget. That's nothing, right, compared to the size of what we're looking at here. And we have our own financial challenges. But we knew from the beginning that we had a partner, and we knew that there are people, and there were comments here, there are people in this village who can step up and contribute and make it happen. And I know there are, and you know there are. And they contribute. They're magnificent benefactors for all kinds of things in Colorado and this nation. They contribute huge. This is a chance for them to contribute here, right, next to in their own community. And those are the ones we need to, and they're listed. I know you know who they are, and we need to approach them, and we need to get them involved, because these are big numbers. I mean, as you know, the staff has done a historical structure report, and it's $5 million for the structures, right, and then $1 million for the pond, just in rough numbers. That's all. That's numbers that we can't do from the Parks and Trails Fund. I mean, that's a discussion for the budget that's coming up that we're going to be talking about, but we can't do that. That's not remotely possible now with the demands that we have and the mill levies that we have and the responsibilities we have of paying off meeting our obligations. So, and this is a property that really lends itself to private people stepping up and contributing. We just need to make sure that convince them this is a good thing, that they need to do this, and this is worth it. And I think it is worth it. I mean, everybody thinks it's so recent. This started 100 years ago. This was, you really understand how important this property is. It was originally a homestead property. The Hopkins were their own history. There's a terrific history of the Hopkins who homesteaded this property. They supplied the miners in the mountains back in 1898, and a great story. And the dairy that they ran here. A great story about Myron Blackmer, who bought this property, 265 acres in 1922. When he came in, he's a legend on his own. He's a local legend, right? I mean, he was involved in the Teapot Dome scandal. But he bought all of this property and then carved, and then what happened in the 1950s, a consortium of local people, including Dwight Eisenhower, purchased the property from Blackmer, and then Ed Honan carved out this little Quincy Farm. It was really, he called it Quincy Farm. It was his, if you ask him now, if you ask Mark Honan, he said, no, we named it Quincy Farm. Craig Anderson said you didn't, but we were there. The Honans were there. And when Myron Blackmer built the property in 1935, he used a famous architect, Linder, who did this and put it all together. This property is really historically significant for what a farm looked like in 1935. So, 100 years from now, I hope we can be able to tell our grandchildren, here's what a farm looked like in 1935. That would be invaluable, right? To be able to save all of the buildings. All of the buildings are historic properties as a unit, because they recognize that historically it was all a unitary farm to work. And so that is what is potential for saving for our future generations to look back and say, the Hopkins house is what a homestead property looked like. I would call it the Blackmer house is what a 1935 farm looked like. It's magnificent, and it's the only one really in western Arapahoe County. So the history of this is phenomenal, and it is our the crown jewel of our community. And getting to the, the easement, obviously, I talked a lot with Kat Anderson, I know, but it really is what the easement says. I mean, I can't really say what she thought, because what she thought is in the easement now. That's what we are guided by. That's it. I mean, you can say what she wanted, but that's not really it. Really, her intention is now reflected in the easement, and we have to follow that, and we should embrace it. I guess my message is, let's embrace it. It is a terrific gift to us, but it's the real value of it is that it prohibits any construction forever. 17 and a half acres will never be built on. You cannot put any new structure on this property. That is the real essence of what's going to be given in the future and what she was given. She didn't want it developed into lots. It never will be. There's no possibility. Even if it were sold, you couldn't put lots on it because the easement will be there forever. And that's what the real value to everybody is of her gift. The other part, she said, I know there's not enough money there, whether you can do this or not, I leave it to you. I'd like to save the barn because it has so much sentimental value. The Hopkins house clearly has value. So those are the two pieces that need to stay. And they need to be, and we have a responsibility as the owner to maintain those. I mean, we're going to have to spend, if it requires money to do it, the city needs to do it. I mean, but, I'd like to save everything. I want to save everything, and I understand others disagree, and we can talk about that. That isn't this annual plan. This annual plan doesn't get there, but it is money. It's all about money, and whether we can get there, and whether we can get our neighbors who have the resources to jump in and do this. And I volunteered before to help you, and I will. I mean, if there's anything I can do to get this going, clearly it's a big lift. There's no doubt about it, right? I mean, this is a big lift. This kind of money is a big deal. So it's not going to be easy, but you got to start somewhere. And I think trying to get everybody on the same page and going together is just terrific. So I wish you all the best, all the luck in the world, and if I can help, let me know. All right, I'll call a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. There you go. Thank you very much for coming. You're all welcome to stay and see the wonderful business that we do here every couple of weeks.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. Next, we have unfinished, new business. Do I do that? 9B first, Resolution 26. That would be City Clerk Gillespie.
Good evening, Mayor Stewart, members of City Council. On August 16th, the Council approved Resolution 19, Series 2022, placing a Tabor issue on the ballot regarding remote and internet sales tax. According to the Fair Campaign Practices Act of the Colorado Revised.
We can hear. Yeah, I can hear you, Lauren. Go ahead.
Okay. The City Council is allowed to pass a resolution in support or opposition of a ballot measure. It does limit the reporting or distribution of the resolution to established customary means. At the last meeting, Council directed staff to present a resolution in support of the issue, which is ballot issue 2A, and so we are presenting that for Council's consideration tonight. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I don't think there are any questions, so I'll entertain a motion. I think I know who wants to give them. Councilor Wheel.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. I move to approve Resolution 26, Series 2022, supporting ballot issue 2A.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously, thank you. Now we'll move to agenda item 8A, unfinished business, Council Bill 13, Series 2022, amending Articles 2, 4, and 9 of Chapter 16 of the Municipal Code concerning zoning regulations pertaining to horse and other agricultural activities, and this is a second and final reading. And Planning Manager Workman, you have the floor. Where is he? Oh, there he is, sorry.
That's all right. It's been a long night for all of us. I'll with that in mind, I'll try and be brief, but still make enough for the record. As was just noted, this is the second and final reading. At this time, staff's not intending to go through each change in detail as we did in the first reading. But if council desires to go through one or more of those, we are prepared to do that. Again, why are we here? We're here to create clarity regarding horses and other agricultural activities and align current regulations more closely with the pre-modernized code and historic practice within the village. This is within the spirit of our housekeeping amendments, which are intended to make corrections, create consistencies, do things like that. There's no significant policy changes proposed as part of this. As council may recall, prior to the modernization in 2019, there was no land use table. Each zone district was its own section of code, and allowed uses for zone districts were listed in that section, and all zone districts built on the allowed uses in the R1 zone district, i.e. a technique that was historically popular called nesting. I'm not going to go through all of this in detail. Suffice it to say that raising of livestock, poultry, keeping and boarding of horses were all allowed in the R1 zone district, the R2 zone district, and the R3 zone district. It was not allowed in the R3A district or the R4 or R5 zone districts. O1 historically allowed for some grazing of livestock, provided that no such use shall be permitted if offensive or injurious because of odor, noise, or other nuisance. And it was allowed by special exception, which is just a fancy way of saying council had to approve it. And in the O2 zone district, agricultural uses and facilities, including conservation of agricultural resources and structures, and equestrian uses and facilities when operated by a nonprofit entity, including keeping, raising, and boarding of livestock and horses. The language that exists in the code today created a land use table to get away from that nesting concept and created a couple of new primary uses, which are agricultural crops or silviculture and agricultural livestock. There was an addition for the prohibition of intensive agriculture in any zone district. There's a prohibition on on-site sales of agricultural products except for community-supported agricultural operations. It created new restrictions for equestrian training, and there were no parking requirements associated with the agricultural uses, and it created some new definitions. Again, staff's not going to go through each one individually, but these are the major buckets of changes that would further align the code language with pre-modernized code language and historic practice. As a reminder, there's revisions to the land use table to align with historic practice. There's a removal of the prohibition of small-scale accessory and occasional sale of products. There's revisions to the horse boarding and training language to align with historical practice. There's a requirement for parking associated with crop and livestock activities to be provided on the property. And then there's a series of updated definitions to create clarity, align with new and revised language, and align with historic practice. City Council heard first reading 2 weeks ago on September 6th. Council approved the proposed amendments on first reading. There were no requests for changes to that language. And there were no requests for any additional information. The proposed changes contained in the staff report for this meeting are identical to those that were presented at first reading. With that, you have the recommended motion in the screen in front of you, as well as in your packets, but staff is available for any questions you all may have.
Any questions for staff? No, I think we talked about this pretty extensively. Councilor Brown?
I actually just have one quick question. Refresh my memory about what, because I know Quincy Farm is a different zoning code.
Correct.
Is boarding of animals is potentially still allowed there? Is that
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Just want to make. Sorry. So
I move to approve on second and final reading, Council Bill 13, Series 2022, a bill for an ordinance amending Articles 2, 4, and 9 of Chapter 16 of the Cherry Hills Village Municipal Code concerning horses and other agricultural activities.
Second.
We have a motion and second. Any further discussion? Anybody? Hearing none, that's a voice vote. Oh, no, it's a roll call.
Counselor Safavi?
Yes.
Counselor Reel?
Yes.
Counselor Brown?
Yes.
Counselor Gallagher?
Yes.
Counselor Sheldon?
Yes.
Okay, that completes the unfinished business, and it looks like that's about everything. I have a brief mayor's report. September 7th, I attended the district fall meeting. That was in Golden for CML, and that was actually well attended by a lot of people. But that's the CML meeting. They reach out in the fall of all the districts. There are 13 or 14 of them in Colorado, and that's ours. And it was in Golden and hosted by Mayor Weinberg, who's delightful, and it was a good time at the golf course up there. I'll be attending some of those coming up too and traveling to them as a board member. On the 9th, we had the OSTAP Shearback Awards. Councilor Brown was there, Councilor Wheel was there. It was very nice. Councilor Kramer made an appearance and then left early. But they did give us a big check that I still have if I'll bring it in and put it on the wall. So that was, I forget how much it was. $220,000. That's a Shearback money. So of the tax money that goes that we just approved again last November that from Arapahoe County, they give back half of that to the municipalities to spend any way we want to. So that's a good source of revenue for us. You know, everything's needed. It was a good event. And the 14th, I had a mayor's lunch with our little group of mayors here at Kachina Taco. That's basically the western mayors in Arapahoe County. And then on the 16th, we had the Highline Canal Dine on the Canal event, and again, Councilor Brown and Councilor Wheel were there. It was a great time, and I think a lot of people. So, really fun event, and kudos to Harriet for pulling off that Highline Conservancy and all that it does. That's my report.
Just a couple quick things. I wanted to let council know that I sent a letter to Paul Workman to send in to P&Z last week. That letter was expressing my support for the master planning effort that our P&Z and various committees are putting forth right now for prioritizing how we spend ARPA money. And my letter was that I am supporting using those funds as much as we can afford to use them towards enhancing our cell coverage in the city. It's an effort that we're going to be, working on here for the next good little bit. And I think I encourage you all to express your support to planning and zoning as they're getting through that process as well. The second thing I wanted to bring up is I would like to maybe jump the gun just a little bit here. I think last we talked about engaging a consultant to do a study for us for broadband and cell coverage. We talked about doing it after the November City Council meeting. I think November 1st is when we have a consultant coming in to talk to us about some options and laying out the big picture for us. I don't see that there's a chance that we're going to say, no, let's not proceed with a study at that point. I'd like to go ahead and authorize staff right now in that process of engaging a consultant now so that maybe we've got something to talk about come November 1st that's actually more than hypothetical. So with the rest of council's support on this matter, I'd like to direct staff to do so.
And just to clarify, that will, we had previously talked about using ARPA funds. This is eligible for ARPA funding, and
the study.
The study itself is eligible for ARPA funding, and you're intending that we would use that funding source for this process.
That is my intent, yes.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify for everybody's benefit the funding source.
Yep, so that's what I'm proposing. So if anyone objects to that, we can certainly table it, discuss it further, kick the can down the road. But I think we're going to end up approving that at some point down the road anyway. I'd like to kick them off and get that sourcing of that study going. It's going to take a little bit just to get it sourced. Randy, you're looking.
How big is the bread box? I'm not sure what.
Yeah, I don't know. Is it a $30,000 study?
Good question. Jay was able to find some of the other studies that look similar, and literally the extent of my expertise here, it looked about that thick.
So it doesn't sound like a $30,000.
So I would say $30,000 to $50,000 would be a rough estimate. But please, council, it could come in higher or lower than that. But 30 to 50, Jay, I don't know if you have any.
I think that's a little low.
Is it? Okay.
Well, I think we at least need to find that out. I mean, to your point, Dan, let's at least get that far, right? Let's find out how much it costs to get a study done and who some of the people are.
Well, we could at least do an actual RFP and get real numbers as well.
That's all. I just want to get the process going is all.
That sounds good.
I'm not suggesting we pull the trigger on a dollar amount tonight. I just want to get instead of waiting until November 1st to start, we can start it now and be 7 weeks ahead or whatever it is.
Makes sense, right? I think, you support everybody, obviously, cell phone issue, so good.
That's all. Thanks.
Councilor Gallagher.
No report.
Councilor Brown.
I just want to say a little bit more about the Highline Canal Conservancy, Dying for the Highline, and our resident, Harriet Lemaire. When she was on council, she stepped down from council in order to pursue preservation of the Highline Canal. And the people I was talking to at that dinner said, yeah, she wanted to be part of this. And I said, no, there was no this, right? There was no this. So I really would like to give commendation to her, Harriet, if you're watching, for creating an amazing legacy that will last in this community and beyond the regional community for generations. So hats off to you.
That's right. That was her vision. That was awesome.
No report.
So on September 13 and 14, I attended Colorado Biosciences Association in Vail. It was an amazing program. 30 of the best Colorado tech, biotech, and medical device companies presented. And there were over 50 investors from around the country, including Amazon Investment Group that were there. And I think a lot of them are going to get some really amazing funding and grow in Colorado. So I think we should all be very proud. Just some amazing startups that have either moved here or they have started from Colorado. That's all.
City Manager?
Any directors have any reports?
No report. I've got a couple quick things. So the Public Works Department as well as the Community Development Department were reaccredited by the American Public Works Association. Thanks to Emily Black for all her hard work on that. So we are reaccredited for 4 more years. There are approximately 170 cities, counties, special districts, federal agencies that are accredited this time. When we became accredited 8 years ago now, there was less than 100. So the program continues to grow, and it's a great program. And then on a not so happy note, we received 2 weeks notice from Pamela Broyles, who has been with us for 14 years. She will be moving back to Montana, so the Public Works Department is working with HR, and we will fill that position.
You had to make me really sad and remember that before my report. Yes, so now that our APWA reaccreditation has wrapped up for this year, we are getting started on a trail inventory project that picks up where our 2016 trail inventory left off. So we have this 2016 trail inventory that we completed that included a legal review of consultants of all of the public trail easements that the city holds and their status to ensure that they were properly documented and recorded. So this inventory contains a short list of unimproved trail easements. So we might hold the easement, but we might not have formalized a trail in that location. So we're going through at this point to take a closer look at that list to determine first the legal status, which we'll be pulling Kathy in to look at, and then also whether or not the city should dedicate resources to actually formalizing a trail there. Doing our first pass over it, it looks like a lot of those are short dead ends. So in those cases, obviously we'll be having some more discussion with PTRC about whether or not dedicating resources to those sections is appropriate. But we'll be working on this project and we'll give council an update once we've completed it.
I had a question to follow up, Emily. Are you even going back to the original plats or looking at some of the development plats to see,
That was what was done in the 2016 inventory for most of the trails that we actually have a formalized trail. So we are doing that process for easements that we don't actually have a trail in that location yet.
Because I remember us discussing this when I was on previous council, and that it was a project we were taking on. I know there's one in Devonshire particularly, I think. Does that ring a bell? That actually goes nowhere.
It's very possible. I don't have
Maybe
off the top of my head.
I'd like to see I'd like to work with you maybe and talk to you about that, because there's trails that we're aware of that go nowhere, and I don't know if we still.
Yeah, and that would, if there are trails that any of you know of, that just send them our way. We'll make sure we double check those plats. Again, and the consultant, when they did this, not only checked plats, but actually did record search, went down to the county and did extensive searches for all documentation, anything that was recorded, anything that was vacated, those type of things. And it is all computerized. So as Councilor Sheldon mentioned last time, we have a map where you can click on it, pulls up the document straight from the county, whatever's recorded, or the plat, or those type of things. So we will continue to update that as well when we do this.
And if I could just follow up on this item with one more comment. I just want to emphasize what Emily brought up regarding next steps on the project. This is not a staff-led project. We will be doing a lot of the heavy lifting, but if there's any decisions to be made about the future status of either making additional investments in trails, vacating, whatever it might be, that we're doing all this work to arm council with the best available information. Yeah. This will be a council exercise. And I believe Emily mentioned that as well, too. I'm reemphasizing that as well, yes.
All right, thank you.
Jay and Emily, I'm just curious, if you take out all the trails to nowhere, it's a pretty short list, isn't it? Like less than 10?
Yeah, there's less than 10 that have any connectivity, would be, without having it all memorized, but from my years of seeing all the plats and dedication, it will be less than 10 that would really have any connectivity to anything else that aren't just dead ends.
Thank you.
Mayor and City Council, you have received the city's 2023 proposed budget, and hopefully you will notice some enhancements to the budget document this year. City staff did use some new software, and hopefully you'll notice that the budget book is a lot more functional, user-friendly, and hopefully it'll provide the relevant information that you need to make your budget decisions. I will also be sending you an electronic link, especially for Councilmember Wheel, because he will have the budget at his fingertips then, and I know he loves having that financial data accessible. Yeah, we are going to be open for any meetings that you have and encourage any questions ahead of time before the October 18th budget study session. So, thank you.
I believe there's another Coffee with a Cop scheduled for September 28th is on my calendar. And then and then we are canceling the October 4th council meeting due to the holiday, so the next regularly scheduled meeting will be October 18th.
Could we just get a census of who might be here on the 18th too, because that is fall break, so I want to make sure that we have a quorum as well. What are we doing?
Yeah, I don't know. I promised Laura that I would get her my answer by Monday.
Okay. And anybody else have a? We should have a quorum then. Yep, looks like it. So we'll keep going. Good, good, good.
A couple of updates from community development. We are particularly glad that you liked the presentation from ICON this evening. If you haven't heard yet, that is the consultant that we've selected to move forward with in terms of negotiations with contract services for city engineering services. And Troy will be our primary contact there, so we're excited. As it relates to the master plan, we had a study session with Planning and Zoning Commission last week where they saw an edited version of most of the text for the document, the same version you guys saw, but with your input incorporated and their input incorporated. And we got some more good input from them, and we're continuing to go through that draft. A couple of things I want to put on your radar at that meeting. We also got direction from them to proceed with October 6th as the third and final open house. So you will see signs go up throughout the community, social media efforts, that kind of stuff. The signs may go up as early as tomorrow. So I do want to put that on your calendar. And we also mapped out a timeline with the Planning and Zoning Commission to have the resolution for the adoption of the updated master plan before this body on December 14th of this year. So we are still on track to have this council take action on that. Correct.
And just apropos to that too, several years ago, we as a council passed an amendment to our charter. It used to be you could only approve or deny the planning and zoning master plan. The council had no other options, but we've amended that now that we can amend it. So we can take it up as a council. If they prioritize cell phones at the very bottom, we can take it up and revisit that decision.
That is correct. That's it for me.
I only have a couple of updates real quick. Just a little bit more follow-up on the Highline Canal discussion from earlier today with some potential next steps. I did have an opportunity to meet with the Highline Canal Collaborative Leadership Team meeting last week, and Denver Water is beginning its conversations about all these jurisdictions taking it over and trying to get a timeline of when all these jurisdictions are taking it over. And so it's sort of getting to that next phase where the rubber's hitting the road and real dollars are going to have to be put into folks' budgets. And when I say folks, I mean other cities. And so the concern is getting more real every meeting now. I just want to say I'm really grateful that City Council approved this study, because a lot of the concerns that the other jurisdictions have come from a place of not knowing. And we will have a much better idea. With that said, in an effort to help those other jurisdictions, the collaborative did put together cost estimates for annual maintenance for each jurisdiction. Their numbers do vary from the numbers that are in our study. So in an effort to give some assurance to council, we will be meeting with the Highline Conservancy and also Denver Water on our modeling and their modeling, comparing the two, trying to figure out why there are differences. So we'll be able to report back when council, or this is before council for accepting the plan, we'll be able to give you some additional information about the feedback. Personally, I think it's a good idea. It's going to be good form if Denver Water and the Conservancy are supportive of our plan. I think that would bode well for our long-term sustainability of it. This will be a giant step towards being able to say that. So hopefully that represents good news for City Council.
And just this is timely because our lease with Denver Water comes up in October, right? So
yes, we're in continued discussions with them. We would like to just basically re-up for a short amount of time, just to buy us a little time to go through this study, et cetera. How that works, we're still talking with Tom Rood at Denver Water.
Have you seen the new language that they want to add in the lease?
No, we are proposing a stopgap lease that continues our old one for just a short amount of time, and then the new language would come, and then one after that. Is that fair, Emily?
Yes, that's correct. So
Yes.
the hope is that is ready for council on the next meeting at October 18th.
The last thing I have is just wanted to keep council plugged in. We've got the best staff in the state, and we wanted to continue to think of new ways to acknowledge and recognize the work that they've done. So we had our employee appreciation barbecue last week. Was it last week? We are attempting to up our game a little bit. We're recognizing folks who have had certain years of service, whether it's 5, 10, 15, 20, 40 years. That's an actual category that we had.
Nobody works that long, do they? No.
But we're trying to just recognize those folks who have really shown a commitment to the village, and some gifts to them to, again, they're gestures of appreciation. We're hoping to continue to do more of that, really to recognize, again, best staff in the state. So, little gifts, are they going to change the world? No, but I guess in some cases they may be parting gifts. But I do think anything we can do to continue to recognize and appreciate our staff, we're going to continue to do that. So I just wanted council to be aware of that.
Very good. All right.
Move to adjourn.
There you go.
Second.
I think that's a second. Without objection, with that, we are adjourned. We'll see everybody next time. Thank you.